Hello, and welcome to this episode where we will be talking about 2012 and what that brought for the gaming industry. Before we do that, though, we'll go over our little Rolling of Gaming segment, and then we'll talk into some modern gaming news before we actually get into the main meat of the podcast, which will be, again, for 2012 year in gaming. Right off the bat, I do apologize regarding my voice. I'm coming down with a cold or allergies. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what exactly it is, but it's been kind of kicking my butt all week. So today actually kind of hit me a little bit harder, but still felt like I was energetic enough to record this here. But again, I do. Please excuse my voice. Um, but also, I'm been kind of experimenting a little bit with how I want to do this somewhat. So usually, what I've done is that I pick three games, and then now these are three games that I have selected at random before, and then eventually I'll put the three games on my YouTube channel. But throughout the week, been I also cover for the remaining days of the week as well too. It's just that I don't really talk about them like on the podcast here. But usually, what I was doing is I was writing like a quick little script and record my voice as I'm talking over, right, and all for my little mini review or my thoughts on a game if I hadn't played it. But it was just taking a little bit of time to actually write the script, and I would do, I mean, very basic research, right, and all, and then just kind of put it, just like get my thoughts on a game. But even then, it just started being a little bit time consuming. And also, what I've been doing is just recording gameplay footage and just posting that up on my YouTube Shorts again, just so that there's some kind of visual right on all the games that I'm talking about. But I thought what I'd do though for this, while I'm doing my podcast here, since I do set aside some time for this, is to discuss the seven games actually that I'll have in the week. I'll just probably give a little bit more quick takes though on them, right, and all, instead of talking more about them in depth. So we'll see how this goes. If anybody's actually listening to this, I'm always open to feedback. It's just I just try to do it with ultimately what I have time to do and all. But and I was enjoying writing the little scripts and all. I really enjoy writing and doing research on video games, so it kind of worked for me. But just sometimes life gets away from me, and before you know it, I'm like, oh crap, I hadn't written the scripts to my little mini reviews that I was going to do on my YouTube Shorts, and so I was just starting to fall behind on that. But yeah, but let's go ahead and start getting into it here. So I have seven games now that I'm going to talk about, and again, I'm going to do probably a little bit more condensed version of my thoughts on these games. But starting with the first one, though, that I got was for Bloody Roar. So this is a fighting game that came out on the PlayStation 1. And it was a Hudson Soft, or actually, no, I forgot who developed this game, but it's a pretty cool concept. And there was a few sequels made to it. One that I know, part two that I know of. I don't, maybe there was more, but part one is the one that I actually got into, and I really enjoyed the concept. And this is when I was really getting into 3D fighters because I was playing the Virtua Fighter games, I was playing like the Tekken games, the Soul Calibers, and during the PlayStation 1 era and the Sega Saturn era. And this one, I remember we rented it. We thought the concept looked cool. And basically, you pick a fighter, but each fighter can morph into like some kind of an animal of some sort. And I thought it was a really fun concept, and definitely makes for some fun fighting action. Very original as well too. And it'll be fun capturing footage for this game. I haven't played it in a hot minute, but I do remember liking it a lot back then. And I remember I used to like the soundtrack to it too, also. But yeah, cool fighting game, and so I'll be pretty excited to talk about this here. Ran at a smooth 60 frames per second, cool character designs, and all. So yeah, I really enjoyed this game. Next up is for Lunar 2 Eternal Blue. And this is going to be for the Sega CD version. And I never got to play this game back then. I did play the original Lunar Silver Star story on the Sega CD, but this one I never got around to playing it. And but I have played like the remake afterwards, and so, but more or less, from what I understand, it's more or less the same story and all, just better graphics and excuse me, some updated play mechanics. But it's just a Lunar game and Lunar 2 in general, right? It's a very charming adventure. Very kind of, in a lot of ways, plays a lot like the first one, just a few little gameplay updates here and there. But for the most part, though, plays very similar. But the story takes place like I forgot how long, but like I think like maybe 1,000 years into the future or something like that. But still very much set like in a medieval sort of like fantasy setting, very anime inspired, and really charming adventure. The writing is really um, it's very charismatic. It's a bit silly at times, but still a lot of fun though. And you go on this really fun adventure, and the translation that was done by Working Designs, it's it added a lot of pop culture references at the time, which made it seem a little bit out of place. But just overall, the Lunar games in general, right, are really fun. Well, 1 and 2, and the Sega CD version I've never actually beat. I've only played like a little bit just to test it out. But if it's but again, just a Lunar 2 game in general, right, and all, it's a really great game. And so we'll look forward to capturing footage on this one here. Let's see. But then next up I have is for Mortal Kombat. And so this one here is for the 2011 version. And so Mortal Kombat, this was really this was sort of like a light reboot of the Mortal Kombat series, and definitely took the brought back like the kind of 2D style gameplay in a way, and very jungle. Yeah, you could do a lot of jungle combos in this, so makes it pretty fun to experiment with a lot of their combos and all, and brought back a lot of really gruesome fatalities in it. And the story was rebooted a bit, where you kind of doing the events of like parts 1, 2, and 3 an extent. And so the story mode that was in it was pretty cool, and definitely gave you a reason to play in single player. And overall, I gotta say, from what I've played, and again, I'm not the, I do like the Mortal Kombat games, but I'm not like the almost hardcore on them, where there's some things that I might miss. But I think this might be my favorite Mortal Kombat game. I just wish that it was released on modern systems again. But yeah, definitely a fun time though for Mortal Kombat fans. And then the next game that I got was for Fallout New Vegas. And I know this game intends to be a fan favorite for Fallout fans. I haven't quite gotten to play this one yet. I'm very interested in trying it out at some point, but because I really like Fallout 3, but this one has eluded me for years. And so my hope is that at some point I'll be able to come back to this game here and play it, as it was definitely a really cool game. Well, sorry, it seems like a really cool game, and so something that I'd be really excited to play at some point. So basically, it takes place like in the kind of like a new Las Vegas wasteland, and yeah, just from what I hear, the story is what really sold this game for a lot of people. So I'd be interested in checking it out. Excuse me. Alrighty, and so next up, kind of a game that I don't know how many people have heard of this game, and I had almost forgotten about it too. But it's Zero the Kamikaze Squirrel. And so this was a platformer from Sunsoft that was released on the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. I want to say this would have been roughly around 1993 or 1994, within that stretch right there. And I don't know a whole lot about it other than it's an action platformer, and obviously you control the squirrel. But it has something to do, like it's set in the same universe or as the Aerial the Acrobat games. So yeah, I don't remember. I mean, I remember seeing the previews of this game and the reviews back then, and it seemed like it was reviewed fairly decently. But I'd be curious to check this game out more. I don't think I've ever played this game. I know I have it on emulation, but so it'll be interesting to capture footage for this and get a sense of what it's all about. Just from what I can see of like the screenshots back then and all, I remember it was like a really colorful looking platformer. So yeah, it'll be curious to check this game out. And next up, I have is Super R Type. And so Super R Type, this was a very well, R Type itself was a very popular shooting series back in the day. But this one here, it was launched. If it wasn't a launch title, it was right around the launch window of the Super Nintendo. And I remember that it was pretty well received, but it was one of those shooters early on in that system's lifetime that it had a lot of slowdown on it. And so because of that, it looked like it kind of held it back a little bit. But from what I understand, though, it's still a pretty cool shooter. And so I'll be interested in checking that out. And because I believe this one is available on the Nintendo Switch Online. If not, I'm sure I have a way of playing it. And let's see. And the last one that I have here is for Beautiful Joe 2. And I'm not too familiar with this one. I really enjoyed Beautiful Joe on the GameCube when I first played it. And that's a great 2D sort of like, well, I guess 2.5D platformer. It has a really cool move set where it's inspired by like special effects that you'd see in a movie. Like, for example, like slow down like you would see something like in the Matrix, or like a really fast high speed camera also that really quickens your strikes. And so this one here, from what I understand, is kind of more of the same, but it seemed to be pretty beloved again from what I remember in the reviews back then, and for people that liked it. So the first one, you control Joe, and then he has his girlfriend Sylvia, but Sylvia's just kind of more in the plot, right? Where this one, from what I understand, you actually control Sylvia too. And so, because I think it's 2 players, I don't quite know, but yeah, I'll actually be excited to record footage for this one, as I never did get to play this one. Where the first one was a GameCube exclusive, well, at first, eventually that one came out on the PlayStation 2. And then, if I recall right, when Beautiful Joe 2 came out, it came out on the GameCube and the PlayStation 2 as well. And so, unfortunately, this series just kind of went under the radar for a lot of people, even after it came out on the PlayStation 2. But from what I do recall, though, for people that were into like action platforming games, this one they were pretty well beloved. But that's what I got there for these games on Rolling of Gaming. Hopefully, my voice isn't completely going under for me. Again, I do apologize, but yeah, so that'll be some interesting games there. So hopefully, like I said, I'll be able to put those, like at least some gameplay footage of those on my YouTube shorts there. But again, I'm open to feedback on how I'm doing that. I know, like, if you go back all the way from the start and all, I've kind of changed a bit on it. My main goal with that is just to provide some information and a visual representation of what the games are, right? And I just, so I mean, ultimately, my goal is like, 3 to 4 5 years from now, because I know I have enough games selected to, I think the last time I calculated it out, to give me like about for 4 years and a half or so if I continue doing this daily. And so again, that if you just want to like just look at a like long library of visual representation of games, right, and all that, you could go there and have a look at that. But we are going to start talking now about modern gaming, and there's actually some pretty cool stuff that happened this week. But we'll get into that there. But let's just start off with some kind of quick announcements here. And so the first one being that, so Starfield, so this is the RPG that came out from Bethesda, 3 years, almost 3 years now, right? For on the Xbox and PC. And so there, it's coming out now on the PlayStation 5. It looks like they announced the date on the 7th of April of 2026. I played it a little bit. I think it's a game that I could get into. It's just, it definitely seems like you really need to invest your time in it, from what I remember of the reviews back then. Like the people that were, that they liked it, right? Because ultimately the game was pretty divisive, right? I mean, it seems like some people just outright hated it. But other people, they're like, I like it. It's not bad. It's definitely involving. It can get really cool, actually. It's just that you have to spend some time with it. And apparently you have to beat the game to unlock more, something to that effect. So, I mean, it's something that, if I had all the time in the world, sure, right, I wouldn't mind giving it a shot. But, again, with time being so limited now to what games to play and to invest my time in something like that, it's not something that immediately captures my attention. But for people that are into or were looking forward to playing it, well, you can play it again on the PlayStation 5. And from what I understand, it's coming with all the DLC that has come out on it and all of whatever patches. And also, you should be getting a fairly decent version of the game, right? And I'm sure, well, I guess you never know, but for the most part, I would assume that it should run pretty fine on the PlayStation 5. I don't see why not. But yeah, so, for fans of that, or people that were looking forward to that game, there you go. And another Xbox game, right, that went over to the PlayStation. Wasn't this one of the games that Phil Spencer had said that would never come out to the PlayStation? Well, here we are. But, lots changed, right? And all. And, how much of that was what he was talking about, what he knew at the time, and then things changed behind the scenes, or if he already knew ahead of time that it was going to go to the PlayStation. I mean, who knows, right? And all, but it's all marketing, and advertising and sales pitches and all that. And, it just, you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt, right? Whenever, they start talking about like that. But, yeah, let's see. Another thing that's coming out early in April too is Shinobi Villains DLC. But this DLC I'd almost forgotten about, because when I first got Shinobi, so this is for the Shinobi Art of Vengeance game that came out last year. When I got it, I got like, I think it was like the deluxe package. And I remember at the time, because it says something like DLC upcoming where you get to fight like some Sega villain. I was like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. I was like, for a little extra. Like, I'm a big fan of Shinobi enough, right? So sure, I'll splurge $2 extra, right, to get that at some point. I completely forgot about it. I beat the Shinobi game sometime last year. And so, yeah, they finally announced right when it's coming out. And so it looks like it's going to be on the 3rd of April, right? I think that's what it is. 3rd of April. Yeah, 3rd of April. And so, yeah, that's pretty cool. Um, from what it looks like, you fight like some kind of villains from Yakuza, I believe. I think that's what it is. I'm not too familiar with the Yakuza games. I really need to try to get that series a shot. But then also you fight Death Adder from Golden Axe. So, that's a blast from the past. And also Dr. Eggman or Dr. Robotnik from Sonic. It's some kind of like a battle mission or something like that. I honestly, I'm not quite sure what it is. I just saw the trailer really quick and then just jotted down the release date. But that's cool. I'm interested, right? To see what it's all about. So that definitely has my curiosity. Let's see. Another thing too that just came out recently, and I don't have a whole lot more information other than just kind of the headline, but Sony is well, Sony PlayStation, I should say, is phasing out the PSN name, like the PlayStation Network name for like their online services. A little weird, and I guess I don't know. It's just like from what I understand, it's like a leak that came out or a rumor that sometime in 2026 they're getting rid of the name or changing it to something else, or I don't know, making it more generic. Uh, it seems like it's not going to really affect the like your friends list or the most of the for the most part the services and all. Maybe they're just trying to unify something. I'm not exactly sure, or maybe preparing for something in the future. But that's the rumor that's going around now. Literally, I just saw this headline like about an hour ago or so. As I was just right now, I'm just kind of driving around doing some chores after I dropped off my daughter, and so I saw it right before I left. So I figured I'd just kind of make a quick mention of it here. But yeah, so that's interesting. I guess we'll see what comes more of that, and if there's any major changes, for better or worse. But yeah, something that supposedly is going to happen at some point this year. Let's see. The other thing too is so I haven't really talked about this game. Actually, I don't think I have, but it's been getting a lot of headlines, and so that's for Crimson Desert. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about it here. And so Crimson Desert, if you don't know, it's like this RPG that was being hyped up a lot. I believe it's from like a Korean developer. And it was like, and so basically, I mean, they were really hyping it up like it was going to be like the next great game. And so ultimately, it finally released this week. And well, let's just say receptions have been a little bit all over the place. But from what I gather from what people have been saying is that the story isn't, I mean, there's not a whole lot there, or what's there isn't that, you know, um, I guess from what it sounds like, I mean, like the setup and I guess what you can kind of tell is the lore and all is pretty cool, but there's just not a lot to it, right? So it doesn't seem like it's gonna like a story intensive game. But what is there is a very open ended world and gameplay structure and all. And so it seems like if you're going, because at the outset it looks like some kind of a medieval, possibly dark fantasy kind of like maybe not dark, but some kind of like a medieval fantasy world, right? Knights, dragons, stuff like that. And so if you're going into a game like that wanting a good story, you're probably going to be let down. Is from kind of what I understand. But if you're going into a game like that you just want like this big open sandbox and be able to do like a lot of cool things in it and all, as far as like make your own adventure, then it seems like that's the crowd, right? That it's really catering to, and for that you'll be pretty satisfied. I have heard that the game does take a while to get going because it seems like there's just a lot of systems and gameplay mechanics and all that. It just takes a while apparently to introduce all of that stuff to you. So, I mean, like I said, if you're into something like a slow burn, make your own adventure sort of game, it definitely, that sounds like it would definitely be up your alley. But if you want a little bit more streamlined gameplay with some story to it and all, you'd probably be let down. That's kind of the reception that I get from what I've read. And so yeah, so I mean, if anything, I mean, it sounds intriguing enough, right enough for people into that sort of genre. Uh, I personally, I mean, it seems like it's something like again, right, something that I feel like I could be interested in. It's just it sounds like it's a pretty beefy game, and I'm not too invested in the overall hype of this game, so I'm gonna have to sit this one out. But for people that have been enjoying it, that's pretty cool because it sounds like you have a pretty meaty, chunky game there to get into. Um, but yeah, but it was just all over the place and all as far as what was being discussed. So I figured I'd make a mention of it there. Um, but one thing though, I thought that was kind of funny. That GameStop made their official announcement. I guess it's just it's kind of. I think it's kind of being done for fun, but also kind of shows right and all just how much we've come as far as video games goes and what's considered retro now. But they made an official announcement for them that I'll just kind of read here what they say. But GameStop declares the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Wii U officially retro consoles. So they're saying the Wii U. So I'm assuming maybe they've already considered the Wii as a retro console because the Wii came out at the same time as the PS3 and the Xbox 360. But they're saying the Wii U. I'm thinking maybe they're talking about like in terms of graphic fidelity, right? Because the Wii was technically like a sixth generation console, right? Which they've already declared that as a retro. But anyways, um, so going off of here, so again, so gameplay today issued an official declaration that the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Nintendo Wii U are, for all practical purposes, now officially retro consoles. The ruling was reached following careful analysis of multiple indicators, including the presence of component cables, the lack of Fortnite, and the realization that they launched when George W. Bush was still president. See, that's where I'm like, wait a minute, the Wii U launched in 2012. George Bush wasn't president. But anyway, under GameStop's retro classification standard, the aforementioned systems will now join the ranks of other beloved legacy hardware in the retro category, such as the Sega Saturn, yeah, the Sega Saturn, and the Nintendo DS. In accordance with this designation, GameStop will run a retro trade-in bonus offer now through March 21st. Customers who bring in a Wii U, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, or any other older console games or accessories will be rewarded with an additional 10% trade-in credit. Additionally, GameStop is pleased to announce stores now accept defective retro consoles on trade. Customers may trade in these historic artifacts even if they are non operable, missing accessories, or aesthetically unfortunate. They just need to power on. GameStop would also like to remind the public that while those systems are now officially classified as retro, they're still very cool, and anyone who owned one at launch is absolutely not old. The full list is available at www.gamestop.com slash video game, or I'm sorry, video dash games slash retro dash gaming. So yeah, kind of funny, but yeah, for me personally, I don't know. I mean, I always kind of look at like what's retro, right, and all, and I would say because anything that is like 12, like 10, I mean, God, two generations back, right? So in this case here, I would say, for you, so pretty much what they're classifying here as retro, um, because I mean, like sometimes when I grab footage for some of these games, like the game footages that I'm doing, and I hook it up the PlayStation 3, for example. And yeah, sure, it's I can connect it to my big screen TV, no problem with HDMI. But at the same time, there's a lot of like archaic sort of things about it, like the UI and all, and it seems kind of slow and all. And I'm like, yeah, this is getting retro now. So I know that it's kind of hard to think of it that way, but shit, I mean, these systems came out in 2005, 2006, so like, yeah, 20 years ago, right? So yeah, I would definitely say they're retro, right? I think maybe we just hate to think of the fact that we're getting old. But I thought that was a pretty funny announcement too. Let's see. So let's get on to some of the bigger stories here because they're all sort of tied together. Um, but we got a lot of updates for systems, and some of these were pretty welcome changes. So starting off, some of them I've been able to test, some of them not so much. So I'll try to give just as much information as I can on these. But starting off with so basically, there's some updates that we got that improves either performance or resolution on some of our favorite consoles out there. But starting off is so with the Nintendo Switch Online. So I believe just recently the Pokemon Gale of Darkness, or I think that's what the game's called, came out on there. And so I'm not familiar with this game, but it seems like it was pretty well beloved by people that are into Pokemon. And so that got a release on the Nintendo Switch Online, which is cool because I mean, it was, I know it was a fairly popular game on there. But it looks like Nintendo quietly updated some of the performance things on the Nintendo Switch Online. So from what I understand, they added like I think like a CRT filter, I think, and or they allowed that to play now in HDR or something like that. They improved something on that, and then supposedly the input lag was improved on the overall service. So I've mentioned that before, where F-Zero was one that was really notable on that, where the input was just not, there was a bit of a lag on there, and a game like that is especially important just because how fast paced that game is. And so I know that when I tried playing the Wind Waker on this service, I don't know, something felt like, I mean, I'm not incredibly sensitive to it, but if unless it's more obvious, and for me, it was getting to the point where it was a bit obvious, right? Just because something about like when I would try to rotate the camera and all, something just felt like it was just a bit lagging more, and so that's where I was like, okay, yeah, something seems off on this, but ultimately, it sounds like they made some improvements on it. So I haven't really, like I said, got in there and really try to test it out. But that's cool though. So hopefully, they made a decent enough improvement where that service is a lot more viable now. But then also, let's see. So the ROG Ally X. So I don't know too much on this. Again, I just kind of picked up on the headline on it. But the ROG Ally X got or is getting a GPU driver update of some sort. So it looks like to overall enhance the performance on it to some extent. Again, I don't know much more about it other than that there, but that's cool. I mean, again, sounds like that system's still getting some, some updates on it. So that's cool. But some of the bigger ones here. So kind of out of nowhere, the Switch 2 got a gaming boost option on an update that it had. And so this I was able to test out, and I did make a video on it on my YouTube channel. Again, it's not the most professional video, and also just kind of more my take on it. But it basically what it is, it's kind of cool. So it's now this is only for handheld though. But what it does is that it basically puts Switch One games into TV mode. So on the Switch One, and pretty much the Switch Two also, right? So if you're playing it docked, you get a little bit more enhanced power, right? Which usually was more typically it was more the resolution, right, and all that could improve on it. I don't think you really ever saw like big boosts in performance, but the resolution though could be improved. And as opposed to like dock or handheld mode, right? So basically, what this does is that it takes the Switch One game and while you're playing it in handheld and forces it to be in TV mode. So meaning that you do get a bump up in resolution, and because the screen on the Switch Two is 1080p, it looks like a lot of the games are being bumped up or at least close to 1080p. And so basically what that means is that on a lot of Switch One games, particularly in handheld, they will look kind of blurry, right? Almost like this, like a Vaseline smear on the screen. Well, this makes a really good effort to try to clean some of that up. And so I got to experiment with it a little bit. And so some of the games that I was really noticing on was like, for example, like Persona 5 or Dragon Quest 11 were two games that I could say that when I would play it on the Switch 1, even on the nice OLED screen or on the Switch 2, it just seemed like kind of a blurry mess, right? Well, maybe not mess. I mean, they're perfectly playable, right? It's just that, yeah, you can notice a lot of blur on them. And so with this update here, it definitely makes things a lot sharper. Like those were two games that I tried out, and they definitely look sharper. And so that definitely gives me more incentive to try to go through these games here, as it just everything looks a lot more clean and sharp. Because the thing is that the UI on these games, so like for example, where the text is at, or like the character portraits and all as you're talking, those look pretty clear and crisp. It's just that the backgrounds, the characters, and all didn't as much, and so now this kind of all meshes together better now, and so that's a very nice update there that I wasn't really quite expecting. And I mean, I wish they would do something like that where they would also boost like the performance, like say like if you put it at least in dock mode, but from my understanding, it doesn't do that. So just again, this is more mainly for the resolution of the game, right? So just to sort of emphasize that, because when I first saw that, I was like, oh shit, are we getting like performance boost? Not quite, right? At least from what I've seen. Maybe there might be a handful of games that do benefit from that, but nothing that I've heard really or seen. But like I said, right, when I was going through like Dragon Quest 11 or Persona 5, I was like, oh wow, it does look a lot sharper though. So definitely kudos for that there, right? And it just makes it a lot more enticing to play those games, especially because those games, they're just a joy to play in handheld, right? So yeah, definitely a nice little update there. Few precautions with it though is that because it is putting it into TV mode, it means that for some games they might lack, I believe, like maybe gyroscope aiming or also like any game that might have had like touch controls on it. I believe it disables that. Um, and then also because it is using more power, obviously that's going to drain your battery even faster. And the Switch 2 is already known to not having the best battery, so just kind of keep that in mind, right? But for what it is, though, as far as like how it looks and all, I mean, like Dragon Quest 11 was probably the one that I was like, oh wow, that actually that cleaned it up really nice. Still, I really like the way that game looks on the PlayStation. Like if you're playing it backwards compatible on the PlayStation 5, it looks really sharp, really 60 frames per second, looks gorgeous, right? But this, it still runs at 30 frames per second, but because of the updated resolution, I'm like, okay, the fact that I can play it very conveniently in a handheld form factor, I think that might be the way I'll go through that game. So definitely a nice improvement. And Persona 5 also too, right? That's been another game that I've been kind of slowly playing. And that is one game where I was like, oh yeah, I mean some of these graphics look a little blurry, especially because like, the UI and the character portraits are really sharp and bright and flashy and all. And so they really contrasted with the blurry graphics in the background. Now it's a lot more tolerable, right? And all to, where it doesn't look as bad. So Metroid Prime is another one too, also that I noticed. I was like, oh wow, this actually looks pretty sharp too, also. So I would say that if you have a big library of Switch One games and you have the Switch Two, you'll probably have a lot of fun experimenting, right, with maybe some of your favorites, right, and all that look a lot more better on there. Like I've heard Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I don't have that one, but supposedly that was one that looked pretty bad on handheld. Well, now it looks much improved. And I know I did try Xenoblade Chronicles, the first one, and that one does look a bit sharper, right? So yeah, a lot of cool stuff there. But then the PlayStation Portal also got an update too. And so this here, what it does is that it gives. I don't know exactly what it means because so the PlayStation Portal can output at 1080p, and this supposedly bumps up the resolution to a max resolution of 1080p. So again, I don't exactly know what exactly is going on, but I tested it out too. Also, again, I put up a video on my YouTube. Again, not the most professional video, but just more my thoughts on it. And honestly, I mean, I didn't notice a whole big lot of change on it, but it supposedly makes everything brighter, more crisp, and all. And so yeah, so that's cool, right? I messed around with some of the games, and I mean, I mean, everything looked good, but I mean, I already thought that the PlayStation Portal, when it's working good, right, when you have a good internet connection, it was already looking pretty sharp and good and all. But this supposedly amps that up more. So again, to my eyes, I didn't see much of a change. And I mean, I was playing things like, Final Fantasy Rebirth, like Metal Gear Solid Delta. I was trying to think of like some games like Ghost of Yote, the games that really are high fidelity graphics on the PlayStation 5. And like I said, I didn't notice too much, but I mean, it definitely looks nice, right? So I would say, I mean, if you have the PlayStation Portal, it's a free update, so why not, right? Few things on that though also is that I'm pretty sure it probably drains the battery a little bit more, and also it's going to need more of a good internet connection, right? And again, it's the speed, yes, but also the stability of your internet connection, right, is what makes a big difference on this. So just something to keep in mind, right, with the PlayStation Portal. If you already own the system, been messing around with it for a while, you already know this, right? But just FYI, right, for anybody that maybe doesn't. But then the other update that happened was for the PSSR, unofficially called 2.0, PSSR 2.0, or even more unofficially, the Pisser 2. I've heard it called like that. I think it's funny, but yeah. So this I got to mess around with a little bit. Um, One game that I think is just absolutely gorgeous, right? I've always thought this game world was really impressive looking was for Avatar, Frontiers of Pandora. And so this is a game from Ubisoft that came out, I think, in 2023. And so the graphics on that just absolutely stunning. And so this was one game that they were talking about that really looked nice on this. So I booted it up. And yeah, I mean, like the foliage, the green grass, and everything, especially during the daytime, it looks absolutely stunning and really sharp and crisp. And I was like, oh wow! Now I didn't get to play this game when it first when the PlayStation 5 Pro came out because it looks like they did some kind of a patch and then it kind of messed up the game right on the PlayStation 5 Pro. So I didn't get to play with that there, but I'm seeing this new version here, and yeah, it looks absolutely stunning. It really does, uh, but it's not perfect still. And some of the like background and all still looks a little off. But I will say this though is from my understanding is that what the update does is that it gives you like a toggle, right, where you can go into your system settings and then turn on like a PSSR update, I believe is what it's called. If you go like into screen and video, and then you'll see the option there. And so again, what it does is that it increases. It can increase the resolution on games across the board, or it gives games that will support it. And so, meaning that it's trying to brute force that into a lot of games. Now, the games that haven't had a specific update for that, then you might not see much. You may not see much of a change or as good of a change, but that's what it's supposed to be doing. Now, um, oh, so sorry, lost my train of thought there. But yeah, so the games I would imagine that actually get patched for a PSSR 2.0, right, upgrade, then I'm sure those will look really nice. Because again, using that Avatar game as an example, everything looked really sharp and clean and all like up front, right? But then at one point, I looked off in the distance, and there was like this, like I think like a mountain way off in the distance, like in the background, and that had like this weird sort of like black shimmering around it, and I was like, oh, that looks odd. So again, it's not completely perfect, right? So just a FYI on that. Um, Another game that I tried out was, let's see, what was it? And I kind of just made a quick little video on it the other day. Ghost of Yote, I tried that, and that, from what I can see, looked pretty nice. I just played it really quick, like during the nighttime scene, but it looked nice from what I could tell, right? But let's see, what else did I try out? Oh, I tried out like Metal Gear Solid Delta, and that now has a quality mode and a performance mode, because before it only had a performance pro mode, but now this you can do quality or performance, but both of them target 60 frames per second though. And when I was messing around with it, I mean, I was like, wow, this looks really good too, also. But I did see some artifacting though, and like ghosting almost on the ground. So again, I guess I'm a little confused on like what exactly it updated and all. And again, I just did like a quick little, you know, overview of it, right, and all as I was testing it out. Um, but let's see, I did try Silent Hill too, and that looked really nice. Although, but I didn't have a save file though, from where one of my biggest issues with that game graphically was towards the end of the game, you're in this hotel, right? I'll just say that, and the floor had this really bad shimmering effect. When I first played it back in 2024 when it came out, right, and then when the PlayStation 5 Pro came out, and so that was pretty heavily criticized that the game just wasn't really taking good advantage of the PlayStation 5 Pro's features, and so it looked pretty bad there. Um, but and I didn't have a save file there, right, so I could test that out. So I don't know to what extent they might have fixed it. I think I saw somewhere in the comments somewhere that that it supposedly wasn't fixed yet. So bit of a bummer. But again, I don't think that they've released like an official patch for it. I think it's just the PS5 trying to brute force the game to make it look a little bit better. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it really held up that well. I didn't get a test out of Silent Hill F, but I have heard that that one did get a lot of good improvements on it, though. So that's cool. Supposedly, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth got a bit of an update. So that was one of the first games too, also that I wanted to check because Final Fantasy VII, and it. I mean, I couldn't quite tell the image difference because I already felt that the update that it had when the PlayStation 5 Pro first came out looked really sharp. And I mean, I was playing it. I was like, okay, I don't know if I see a difference, but I mean, it looks sharp as fuck. Like everything looks nice. It does. I don't know. For me, because everything looks really sharp and all, you do kind of see like when those like certain like parts of the background sort of like appear and disappear and all, or kind of warp together in and out, which seems a little off, and that seems a little bit more obvious. But when it looks, when everything is running good though and all, I was like, fuck, that looks really good. So yeah, but again, that was just like a quick little, you know, gameplay, right? That I played on it and all. But yeah, I mean, for the most part though, it looked pretty good though overall. Let's get into it now, though, with another story here. And, well, actually, two stories that were probably getting the most headlines, it seemed like, during this past week. I'm a bit late on this here, but just wanted to touch base still, as, again, it was quite the controversial things going on in gaming. And so the first one is that Microsoft, as far as I know, officially announced that they're introducing Copilot into gaming. So probably into this new Project Helix console that they're releasing at some point. And so that definitely has a lot of people up in arms, right, about this. So Copilot, in case you don't know, it's like this artificial intelligence that Microsoft uses, and it seems like they're really trying to push it on everyone. I know, like within my job, we have like these Word documents that we need to save to our computer. They wanted us to use Copilot on it, but it wasn't really working though. And so ultimately they had to switch over to something else, and it was just causing a bunch of headaches, right, for a bit there at my job. Again, with what I currently do, it wasn't like something that's a big part of my job, but it was just more like this nuisance, right? But from what I can tell, though, for a lot of other jobs, though, that are out there that really try to force people to use this Copilot, it's an even bigger headache. So I think that's why a lot of people are very much upset at the thought of having Copilot into gaming. Because what would that look like? Not only, or I guess I should say, not only what it would look like potentially, right? Like we're thinking probably like it's gonna, give you like these walkthroughs or show you how to play the game and things along that line. That's kind of what I'm thinking of. But also not only that, but how much is that going to really hamper the overall operating system and the performance of games, which I think is a big concern because just a little bit that I have messed around with Copilot, it seems to have a lot of issues with it, and definitely something that I don't think really anybody wanted, but here they are, trying to force this on everyone, right? And it just it's another thing with this whole AI stuff, right? That's trying to be forced into video games. Again, we've talked about before how AI has always been a part of video games, right? But now it's just, seems to be being implemented in ways that is just uncalled for or unasked for. And well, here we are though, but that's about as much as I know on it and all. I just know that it wasn't very well received. So I doubt Microsoft will back out of this, though, because Copilot definitely seems to be a big part of their strategy and just their overall software that they're doing all across the board. And so I can't see them backing out of it. It is something that they're really trying to push. I mean, with everything that they're investing in it, and I'm just speculating here, but with the new CEO, Asha, who has a background in AI, yeah, I mean, I can only imagine they're going to really try to implement that. So we'll see what that all brings. I mean, again, I'm not completely upset about it or anything. I just guess I need to see how exactly it's going to be implemented, but it's not something that I'm certainly holding my breath for that it'll be something good, but we'll see, like I'm still interested in the Project Helix, cautiously optimistic about it. I'll say, again, not because I think that it's going to have a lot of cool games on it and all, just because more for the sake of like preservation and things like that. Once I find out exactly what the system is and how much of its the Xbox games it'll preserve along with like emulation and things like that. But the big one, though, another story that came out that was just really, really controversial was the NVIDIA announced their DLSS 5, and holy heck was that mocked to death. So DLSS, and again, I'm not the most technical person probably to explain this completely as far as the technicalities of it, but DLSS, so there's a lot of like artificial upscalers AI upscalers out there, right? So let's see, I might get some of my acronyms wrong or terms wrong, but there's like what I believe FSR, DLSS, and then PSSR. And so again, which one gets used, I think has to do with the company behind the product. But DLSS has been used on computers, right, for a while. And so ultimately what the goal of it is actually pretty cool, where its goal is to upscale the game at a higher resolution artificially without trying to do it, natively. And so what that means, because if you try to increase the resolution natively, it's going to tank performance, right? So then that's where you get that, have to choose, do you want higher performance or do you want higher resolution? Well, the goal of things like DLSS or PSSR or FSR or whatever all those are called, is that it artificially makes the game look sharper, so it doesn't put it doesn't task the like the GPU or CPU or whatever, right? More so, meaning that your there's more chance that you can increase your performance, right? So if you can get a nice looking game resolution wise, right, while at the same time, trying to have good performance, that's kind of the middle ground, right, that everyone wants. And so that's kind of the purpose of a lot of these artificial upscalers. And so on the PC side, I know that there's been some that has been pretty well received overall. I think like DLSS is one of them. But what DLSS 5 is, from the bit that I saw of this, is that it's using this artificial intelligence to, I don't know what it's trying to, I mean, it seems like what it's trying to do is like not only increase the resolution, but also like change the graphics to the game. And so they were showing off like their little trailer for it. And oh man, that did not go over well. Basically kind of think of it like, if you've ever like done AI on yourself, like to, make you look younger or whatever, it kind of looks like that, but everything kind of, it just looks like, it looks, AI has a certain look, right? That it's like, it kind of looks real, but it kind of looks off, right? But it's trying to go for realism. And so apparently what this artificial intelligence is going to do, from at least from the samples that they've shown, is it's going to take this filter and that kind of almost like basically replaces like the graphics in a way. And sure, it makes the characters look, you know, it's kind of impressive actually, right? That it can change like like for example, they show like Grace's face from Resident Evil, right? The when she's walking down the street, and then it shows like a close up of her face, at the very beginning of the game. And so, there's a version that we know now, right? That's out right now. And Resident Evil 9 is an excellent looking game, right? And Capcom's characters, the what they use, for the facial models and all. They have a certain look. Because a lot of times they'll actually get like actual real life actors to model their faces after. Like at least I know with Leon Kennedy they did, and Grace, or Claire and Jill Valentine and all. So I don't know if that's the same though with Grace though. But anyway, so look, and the game looks great, right? What this AI filter did, though, is that it changes her face, though, and then, and granted, it does, it seems like it makes everything look a lot crisper and all from what I can tell in the pictures, but the look of her face, so now looks, I guess, more real, but it has that artificial intelligence look, right? Like, yeah, it just looks like every time I see something in AI, everything has the same look to it. And so the concern with that is that outside of just everything that comes with AI, is that if we're using this filter, is it going to give every single game out there, that's using this pretty much the same look? Because they were showing also like Hogwarts Legacy, right? And so it almost looks like it's using the same filter, so that Capcom characters now look like the same as something like from a Harry Potter game. And so ultimately it's just like almost like it's unifying everything. And that is a bit upsetting there, right? Because art is supposed to be unique and different. Like Capcom games look like Capcom games, and and so forth, right? And so for me personally, like I said, it looks cool at first, right? When you think about like the graphic fidelity about it, but when you think of like the uniqueness of it, and I've been playing games for a while, and so I do appreciate that certain games look different from each other, and so to have everything just kind of unified and have like this very artificial look to it, that's not something that I think nobody really wants to see. Now my guess is that maybe they're doing something like this. I don't know for sure, right? Actually, I probably wouldn't even trust this, just because ultimately it comes down to money, right? But another thought is that they possibly could be doing this, right, to really try to improve graphics, where you're pretty much just putting a filter over it, right? And almost as a solution maybe for like the RAM shortages, right? It's like, hey, look, yes, AI is taking up all the RAM shortages, but look what AI can do also. But no, it's like, no, we don't want that. And so I don't know. It's not going to stop. They're going to end up releasing it, because even the CEO, I saw something like he came out like saying like, no, you guys are wrong. Like the customers or the consumers or the critics are wrong. And it's like, whoa, no, we're not. We know what we see with our eyes. But I tell you, this whole AI thing, it's getting out of control. But I always believe it, like, AI can be a pretty cool tool. But I think that just like anything though, right? When something is made easier to do, which is kind of what we want in a way, right? Work smarter, not harder kind of thing. Any tool that can allow, for you to work, where it's not as much work to put into it, um, can be a good thing. It's just that a lot of times it ends up getting exploited too. And so I think that's one of the main concerns with AI, right? It's just like, it's not that, AI doesn't have its purposes. I mean, shit, if AI can cure cancer, for example, right? Great. But I feel like there's always the people that are controlling AI and will have more nefarious means behind it. And that is a concern right there as well, because unfortunately, something good will always get turned into something bad, right? Because unfortunately, humans are just humans, and there's always people out there that are very greedy and all. And um, I just, I just wish that we could use the technology and tools available to us for the good. And it's not to say that it can't be used for good. It's just that I feel like there's just too much of a temptation out there to use it for monetary gains, which a lot of times ends up screwing people a lot also, right? So the benefit that it had ultimately gets outbalanced by the negativity of how we use it. That's a bit cynical there and all, and but I've just seen it too many times over and over and over in my age of just what humans are capable of, right? And all when we get new technology, and that's why my concern with AI is, and I'm going further past just video games, right, on this, but that's just my thought on it there. But it sounds like it'll still be optional for the developers, right? And maybe they can use it in good ways. It's just they were just what they showed off, though, looked just very just something that people don't want, right? I mean, all across the board, people were really downvoting this here, um, but we'll see what ends up happening on this and all. But that definitely wasn't a good showpiece for them, though. But all right, let's get out of modern gaming stuff and go back into I mean, it's starting to get closer, right? I mean, I was going to say into the distant past, but now it's not so distant. In 2012, so we're going to talk about 2012 in gaming this year or this week here. And so, 2012 wasn't one of the more memorable years for me personally. But it's but it's I start making my list here of all the games that came out on it and all. It's like, actually there was some pretty good stuff, right? It's just when I'm talking about these years, right, that maybe weren't the most iconic years in gaming. Some of the games that I mentioned, though, it is a good opportunity to maybe get some information on some hidden gems or things like that, right? I mean, there were some pretty big names that came out this year, right? It's just, again, it's not one of the more standout years in gaming, but there was some good stuff, though. And we also saw the release of two systems, but kind of like the overall year, right? These two systems, where it wasn't as memorable, these two systems are kind of that as well, too. Although they definitely have their charm and have been more beloved more recently, actually. But at the time of their launch and all, and then when they were supposedly in their prime, they didn't fare too well. And that's for the PlayStation Vita and the Nintendo Wii U. But we will talk about those more here in a bit. So let's just kind of start off reading on what happened in this year in 2012 with statistics and news story bits and whatnot. So numerous video games were released in 2012. Many awards went to games such as Madden NFL 13, NBA 2K13, WWE 13, Borderlands 2, Far Cry 3, Journey, Mass Effect 3, Dishonored, The Walking Dead, and XCOM Enemy Unknown. The year began with a worldwide release of Sony's handheld game console, the PlayStation Vita. Originally launched in Japan in 2011, the end of the year marked the worldwide release of Nintendo's home game console, the Wii U. Series with new installments in 2012 include Alan Wake, Assassin's Creed, Borderlands, Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, Darksiders, Dead or Alive, Diablo, Fable, Far Cry, Forza Motorsport, Guild Wars, Halo, Hitman, Mario Party, Marvel vs. Capcom, Mass Effect, Max Payne, Medal of Honor, Modern Combat, Need for Speed, Ninja Gaiden, PlanetSide, Pokemon, Prototype, Resident Evil, Silent Hill, Sniper Elite, Spec Ops, Super Mario, Tekken, The Darkness, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon, Transformers, Trials, XCOM, and Yakuza. In addition to 2012 saw the introduction of several new properties, including Asura's Wrath, Dishonored, Gravity Rush, Journey, Lollipop Chainsaw, Sleeping Dogs, and for Forza Horizon. So again, for the hardware release, so there was this year saw the launch of the first home console in the 8th generation of gaming, the Wii U, and the PlayStation Vita made its launch in North America and Europe after releasing in Japan the previous year. Nintendo also released the first model revision of the Nintendo 3DS this year, the 3DS XL. 2 home console revisions also came out this year, the PlayStation 3 Super Slim and the Wii Mini. So yeah, let's see. So the PlayStation Vita came out here in North America on February 15th, and then in Europe on February 22nd. The Nintendo 3DS XL came out on July 28th in Japan and Europe, August 19th in North America, and August 23rd in Australia. The PlayStation Super Slim. So this is a third revision of the system, and so it's like a slim version still, but this one it has like a slider door, right, where you slide it over to one side where you can pop in the disc. I've never actually seen one of those in person, but yeah, it came out kind of late in the system's lifetime. But that came out on September 25th. And then the Wii U, so that came out on November 18th in North America, November 30th in the PAL regions, and December 7th the Wii Mini came out in December 7th in Canada, and then the Wii U in Japan on December 8th. So it looks like it came out first in North America. Interesting. And then the Neo Geo X on December 18th. I'm not sure exactly what that is. Oh, okay, so some kind of a handheld device. Oh, interesting. I didn't know about that. But that was introduced in December. But let's talk a bit about the PlayStation Vita and the Wii U here. So ultimately, both of these systems didn't do very well. I mean, the Wii U was actually on the market longer than I thought originally, because it was on the market for almost 5 years before its next successor came out. But the PlayStation Vita kind of fizzled out fairly quickly. So let's go over the PlayStation Vita, because this is actually one system that I'm just not too familiar with. So I'm actually going to state something here. I was thinking about it. I was making my notes. So prior to 2011, prior to 2012, not that I played every video game out there, not that I beat every video game out there, but I felt I had a pretty good overall understanding or experience with like a lot of the major games that were coming out there, and even a lot of like hidden gems and a lot of the major consoles and all. And at least where I had some pretty good knowledge, because as I've been doing this, it's like, oh, okay, I remember this game, or I remember that game and all, even if I didn't play it too much. But because I remember I was buying a lot of games back then, and then somehow I was just playing a lot of games, or at least I knew a lot about games, right, and all, and that was also like the magazines I would get and whatnot. Well, as I started thinking about 2012, as I was making my notes here, and going forward from 2012 and on, I've still definitely have played a lot of video games and beaten several of them, but I have been noticing that this is really where my backlog started getting bigger, and also not only that, my personal knowledge of certain video games and consoles. And when I think about it, I think a lot of it just had to do that, again, my backlog was just getting bigger, and so I'm just kind of like, whoa, okay, I'm getting drowned in a bunch of video games. But also at the time, with what I was going through at the time in my life, I was getting into my 30s, and so trying to get my life in order. And so I do remember that during a good stretch there, early in this decade here of the 2010s, not that I wasn't playing video games, I was still playing a lot, but I was just trying to find my way in, my work life and all. And so ultimately, I just remember that I wasn't quite playing as games as much, and started finding other interests. Like I remember I really got into fitness for a while. And so that's sort of what took a lot of my time and energy as far as what I was getting into reviewing, researching, and all that stuff. So some of this stuff just sort of eluded me, right? So again, I know of a lot of games, right, that come out. It's just that I feel like I don't have like more an in-depth knowledge of them than I did in the prior years. Or also systems. So for example, the PlayStation Vita, I never owned this system, not even to this day. I've been tempted of maybe buying one, because I know you can really, you can mod them and all, but my concern with the PlayStation Vita is just because of its storage, where it had a proprietary storage on it, and that is also kind of expensive too. And so that's kind of the one thing that's been sort of holding me back on it. Maybe I can do a little bit more research and all to see if there's ways around that. And also, the emulation scene on the PlayStation Vita isn't quite there yet. Where yes, you can emulate some Vita games, but it's still not quite to the point where I would say that most of the library is playable. But yeah, and honestly, I mean, the PlayStation Vita, I mean, there were some decent games on it from what I understand, but nothing really that stands out too much. And so again, I think a part of all that is why I just, and at the time too, also, like I said before, right, and I wasn't too much into handheld gaming, but anyways, let's read a bit about this here. So the PlayStation Vita is a handheld system developed and marketed by Sony Computer Entertainment. It was first released in Japan on December 17th of 2011, then in other international territories on February 22nd of 2012, and was produced until discontinuation on March 1st of 2019. So, okay, so this still lasted for a bit. But the console is the successor of the PlayStation Portable and a part of the PlayStation brand of gaming devices as part of the eighth generation of video game consoles. It primarily competed against the Nintendo 3DS. The original model of the handheld includes a 5-inch OLED multi-touch capacitive touchscreen, which was kind of a big deal. It was an OLED screen going all the way back in 2012 on a handheld for a game console. A rear touchpad, 2 analog joysticks, the front and shoulder push button input, and supports Bluetooth and Wi-Fi as standard, while a variant model was also sold with an additional 3G modem. The Vita featured a quad-core ARM Cortex A9 MP core GPU and a quad-core SGX 543 MP GPU. The PS Vita 2000 series, a revised version of the system, was released across 2013 and 14. It has all of the same features with a slightly smaller size, extended battery life, and an LCD panel instead of an OLED. Sony released the PlayStation TV, a short-lived, repurposed version of the Vita that uses television screen like a home video game console. This continued at the end of 2015. Yeah, so the PlayStation Vita was intended to meld the experience of big budget dedicated video game platforms with the then up and coming trend of mobile gaming as seen on smartphones and tablets. However, in the year after the device's successful launch, sales of the hardware and its big budget games stalled, threatening to end its lifespan. So it sold decently at first. So a concentrated effort to attract smaller independent developers in the West, combined with strong support from mid-level Japanese companies, helped keep the platform afloat. Though this led to less diversity in its game library, its strength and support in JRPGs, visual novels, and Western-developed indie games. Excuse me. This built moderate sales in Japan and a smaller yet passionate user base in the West. Though Sony has not released exact figures, estimates are around 15 to 16 million units. In the platform's last year, Sony promoted the PlayStation Vita ability to work in conjunction with its other gaming products, such as a remote play of PlayStation 4 games, similar to the Wii U's function of off-TV play. The platform stalled in 2017 upon the release of the the Nintendo Switch, and was completely discontinued in 2019. The system is regarded as a commercial failure in the video game industry and one significantly outsold by Nintendo's 3DS. No direct successor was released by Sony, though in 2023, a similar remote play accessory, the PlayStation Portal, was released for the PlayStation 5, but that comes down the road. So, yeah, I mean, ultimately, it just ultimately didn't do so well. Let's look at some of its launch games that it had come out with. Let's see. So some of the games that it came out with. So, and some of these are like games that were available like on the PSN network. But Escape Plan, Hot Shots Golf, World Invitational, Hustle Kings, Little Deviants, Mod Nation Racers, Super Stardust Delta, Uncharted Golden Abyss, and Wipeout 2048. Out of those right there, I mean, I've had a curiosity to play the Uncharted. Excuse me. Oh my God. Excuse me. The Uncharted Golden Abyss game, along with Wipeout 2048. Gravity Rush, I heard, is a pretty cool game also. That came out within its launch window. But also MLB 12 The Show, Reality Fighters, and Unit 3. And then also several third-party games like Army Corps of Hell, Asphalt Injection, Ben 10 Galactic Racing, Blaze Blue, Dungeon Hunter Alliance, Dynasty Warriors Next, F1 2011, EA Sports FIFA Soccer, Luminous Electronic Symphony, Michael Jackson The Experience, Plants vs. Zombies, Rayman Origins, Shinobito, Revenge of Zen, Tales of Space, Mutant Blobs, Touch My Katamari, Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and Virtual Tennis 4 World Tour Tournament. So again, out of those, I mean, there's some decent games on there, right? And again, the Uncharted one and Wipeout 2048 are the ones that I feel like I would have gotten into. But everything else, it's like, well, you can play them somewhere else. But, ultimately, again, being able to play on a handheld, and basically the PlayStation Vita, I mean, as far as like the hardware, it was pretty impressive because it's like almost like a PlayStation 3, not quite as powerful from what I understand, but I mean, it produced visuals on par with that. And I mean, like when I've seen like video footage of like that Uncharted game, I mean, I was like, damn, that looks pretty impressive. So, but yeah, I mean, just ultimately, right. It just seems like it was just the times were changing, right? With, the tablets becoming more of a big deal and whatnot. And even the 3DS, I mean, it kind of suffered from that as well too, but Nintendo still had their sort of niche in that market there. And so I think ultimately the PlayStation Vita just wasn't able to compete well in it. But from the people that played it, they do have, but usually what I hear about the PlayStation Vita, and kind of like what I mentioned earlier there, what I was reading off, is that it seemed like it was more beloved for people that were really into JRPGs and indie games. And for people, for people that were into that scene there, it was a really great system. But when we're talking about like exclusives for the system, right, and all, I just, it never really seemed, I don't really hear a lot of talk about like PlayStation Vita games, right? And so that's where I think, unfortunately, right, it just really suffered in sales because of that there. But it's an interesting little device. I might consider getting it at some point, like I said, right, if I figure out how to mod one and all, and just so I can have it. But not something I'm rushing out to do, though. But let's get into the Wii U also. So the Wii U, this is another system that because I remember for me personally, I was a bit, I just wasn't really interested. I started losing interest in the Wii. After like about the novelty wore off, and I mentioned it before, right? It was a Twilight Princess that really hooked me on that system for a bit, and then some few other games as well too. But after like, I don't know, 3 years or so into the Wii, and that's because I also never got games like Mario Galaxy and all back in the day. I just started losing interest in the whole gimmicky thing and all, and it was, and then when Xbox started, the 360 started, focusing more on things like the Kinect and all, like we've talked about earlier. It was really the PlayStation 3 during this stretch here that was like my main system, right? From like 2010 and on, right? I mean, up for a good while though. I mean, that was my system there. So I was all about PlayStation at this time. And it's just because I was like, well, the Xbox isn't really doing anything, and Nintendo, I don't care for the Wii anymore. I think I was like I said, right, I was starting to get more into like, I was starting to lose a little bit of interest in video games, and then any video game that I would play, I wanted to be something that was like cool, right? And the PlayStation is just what had it for me. Has nothing to do with like fanboyism or console wars or anything like that. It's just simply what I thought at the time was available, that interested me. And so when the Wii U came out, I will say that I did have an interest in it at first because they showed off this trailer for The Legend of Zelda that had kind of a similar graphical style to like something like the Twilight Princess, but running in HD, running at 60 frames per second, where it's like Link is inside like this chapel of some sort and taking on like the spider kind of demon. And I remember when I first saw that, I was like, oh damn, that looks badass. I was like, oh hell yeah, I'm on board with that, right? I was like, and my thought what that was going to be the next Zelda game. And so I did have an interest in it at first, right? And I was also interested, I was like, okay, so Nintendo's finally getting into HD. Now ultimately the Wii U, it is an 8th generation system. But again, Nintendo, they started being one generation behind in terms of like power and graphics and all. And so the power of the Wii U can be compared to like something like the Xbox 360 or the PlayStation 3, more or less, right? So then why is it an 8th generation system? Well, starting with the Wii and then going forward, right? Or really the Nintendo DS and going forward, a lot of the Nintendo systems and all during this stretch here had some kind of a gimmick of some sort. And that's that was to set it apart from its other competitors. On the Nintendo DS, you had the stylus, the dual screen with the stylus and all. The Nintendo Wii, you had the Wiimote. The Nintendo 3DS, even, you still had the dual screen with the stylus, but then also you had the 3D effect. So with the Wii U, its controller was kind of like a big tablet with a screen on there, right? That you can also use as a regular controller. And so that was kind of its main gimmick there, right? Where it's almost like, it was kind of like trying to do a few different things, right? Where almost like you had like the dual screen, right? So for example, like if you're playing a game and then, let's just say like a Zelda game, right? You're playing the game on the TV, but then you can see like the map and all on your tablet controller thing. So things like, along the lines of that, or also you can play portably, where if someone wants to watch the TV, you can switch it over to portable mode or gamepad mode or whatever it was called, and then you can continue playing your game on the device. So all of that sounded pretty cool, and I remember when they were announcing that, I was like, "Oh, okay, that sounds interesting." But then, now this is coming from my personal experience with understanding what the system was. But then when the games were starting to be announced for it and all, nothing really struck me as something that I wanted to have right away. And then I think at one point they announced that Zelda trailer wasn't actually real. It was just more of a demo. And I think that's what turned me off on it too. I was like, oh, that's lame. And again, I was like, I'm not interested in Nintendo still, right? Again, I was all about the PlayStation 3 during this stretch. And then eventually, it took me, because I wasn't quite sure how the Wii worked as far as like the portable mode of it. Well, later on, I found out that it's, it doesn't have a lot of range, right? It's just somehow, however, it's reading the signal from the Wii U system on the tablet controller thing. It has a very short range, and so it's not like you can, go outside of the house, right, and all, and continue playing. I've tested it out. Because I got the Wii U much less, honestly, I got it like about 4 or 5 years ago, I think, and I got it just to have it because mainly I wanted the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD versions, and so I got it, and then eventually I ended up modding it, and also I actually kind of like it now because with all the cool things you can do with mods. But I've tested it out though, and so like obviously if I'm in the living room, it plays just fine. At the time when I first got the Wii. The Wii U, I was still trying to sleep train one of my daughters, and so their room is not that far from where the living room is at, and so we would lie her down in bed, and then the other bed that was there in the room, I would go lie down on that, as just try waiting for her to go to sleep, and so I would take the Wii U tablet in there, and now again my daughter's room isn't that far away from like where the Wii U console was at. I don't know. 10 feet, maybe. No, more than that. What am I talking about? Like 20 feet, maybe. But it's not that far, right? It's where my living room is at and where their room is at. It's pretty close together. And I was already losing signal, right? So just to kind of give you an idea. But anyway, let's go ahead and talk a bit about actual information on this system here. So the Wii U is a home video game console developed by Nintendo as a successor to the Wii. Released in late 2012, it was the first 8th generation video game console and competed with Microsoft Xbox One and Sony's PlayStation 4. The Wii U was the first Nintendo console to support high-definition graphics. The primary controller, the Wii U gamepad, features an embedded touchscreen, a D-pad, analog sticks, and action buttons. The screen can be used either as a supplement to the main screen or in supported games to play directly on the gamepad. The Wii U is backwards compatible with the Wii software and accessories, which is a cool thing now again to get because again, I've been trying to, as I've been going back and trying to play games on the Wii instead of getting a Wii and having a Wii U, the Wii U is pretty much backwards compatible with it, right? So you can really just get away with just using the Wii U. But there might be some things that might not be supported, but as far as I know, most everything has been compatible with like not only the games but the accessories as well too. But games can support any combination of the gamepad, Wii U, Pro Controller, Wiimote, Nunchuck, Balance Board, or Classic Controller. Online functionalities included the Nintendo Network and Miiverse, an integrated social networking service which allowed users to share content in game-specific communities. The Wii U received praise for its gamepad backwards compatibility, lower price compared to competitors, and first-party game library, but criticism for its user interface, hardware performance, and the gamepad's short battery life, which is true. Yeah, so the interface, it's very slow and sluggish and laggy a lot. It's kind of annoying actually to use. And yeah, the battery life too also on the gamepad is just it's pretty bad. But it was a commercial failure with 13.56 million units sold worldwide. It is Nintendo's lowest selling home console and its second lowest selling console overall, ahead of the Virtual Boy. Its poor sales have been attributed to a weak launch game lineup, limited third-party support, and lackluster marketing that failed to clearly distinguish it from the original Wii. The Nintendo discontinued the Wii U on January 31st of 2017. And then on March 3rd, it released its successor, Nintendo Switch, but we'll get into that more at that point. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, because when I use the Wii, it's kind of a pain in the ass sometimes because it loads a lot. Like, and I'm talking about just like the user face, right? And so it's just I don't know. It's not the most smooth playing experience, right? When you're just trying to navigate something as simple as like going through games, right? Like when you put in a Wii game, I mean, it's pretty cool that it is backwards compatible, no doubt, but it just takes a while for everything to load up, and also again, kind of a nuisance. But it was kind of nice, so also to see, when you're using the Wii U, the high definition graphics of it. At first, I thought that it was also going to output high definition graphics on the Wii, but no, it's just on the Wii U that it does that on. But it is still kind of cool though, right? And all that it's you can play not only Wii games, but also have like because it has all the connections and everything set up so that you can play Wii games and hook up the Wii sensor bar and all that. I keep it plugged in now just because again, every now and then I like to try to go back, excuse me, and play. Honestly, I use it more as a Wii instead of the Wii U. But because I've been able to mod the Wii U, there's also a bunch of cool stuff that I've been able to do on it. And so, like I said, right, for that, it is worth checking out. But yeah, it's an interesting system for sure. And I think that Nintendo had an idea of what they wanted to do with it, but that was the other thing too, is that the way they went about it, marketing it, where, like I looked at it, I'm like, okay, I know the Wii U, that is another console, right? It's the next evolution of Nintendo system. Like because I'm geek enough to know all that stuff. But for like your average consumer, I can see why, right? That would have been confusing because you had things like, if you think about it on the Wii, right? You had like the Wii board, the Wii Zapper, the Wii balance board, or whatever all those peripherals were called. And now you get this Wii U. Oh, it has a gamepad. Oh, okay. And also, it didn't help too that the Wii U looks very similar to the Wii, right? Like at a first glance, right? Because I remember even me at the time, right? I was, my first initial thought was like, is that the same system? They're just adding a gamepad. I mean, I immediately figured it out. I was like, oh, no, it's a whole new system. But your average consumer, right? And all you're just looking, I was like, oh, okay, that looks just like you just buy a tablet for the Wii. And so, I can definitely see how that was confusing, right? For a lot of people, and ultimately what probably hurt its sales. And I think it's a very ambitious system. I think it's unique. It's just unfortunately they didn't quite implement it as well as they probably hoped. And it didn't take until its next system where they kind of perfected more, I think, what they were really trying to do with it. And I think a part of it was because, like I said, there was the tablets and mobile gaming were becoming a big threat to the video game industry. But I think eventually people learned that they can both coincide with just regular console gaming along with like mobile gaming, because they pretty much do now. But at the time, I think it was like a big old threat. And so that's why Nintendo probably developed like the system to have like a tablet kind of controller, right? And all kind of like the way tablets were becoming a big thing back then. And so I get the concept of it and all. I just think that it was just kind of in this weird time where it wasn't quite like the right idea at the time, and the idea wasn't perfected as well, right? As eventually they would. But yeah, it's an interesting little system here. And yeah, and then also, like I said, the launch lineup too also wasn't the greatest. So I'm actually trying to look here to see what the launch lineup was. I remember one of its I don't know if it was a packing game or not, but it was because there was two versions that came out of it. There was an 8 GB one, and then I think a 32 GB one. I think the 32 GB one was the black one, right? Um, but I know that I don't know if Nintendo Land came as a bundle on like the more expensive one, but I've played that a bit, and it was trying to be like what Wii Sports was, where it was a combination of like all these different mini games and all that make use of the touchpad, and it actually makes pretty good use of the touchpad. It's just it's just like mini games, right? So nothing too crazy as far as um like like something that's like a must play, right? But okay, here we go. So it actually had quite a decent amount. It had 32 launch titles in North America. And so this is when the system released in November 18th. So I'm just going to read these off here really quick. So we had like a set, and a lot of these are like ports, right? From like games that were already coming out on like the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. But it was kind of cool though. It was kind of cool, right, to see some of these games on the Nintendo system, right? Because a lot of these kind of games got missed out on the Wii. But we had like Assassin's Creed 3, Batman Arkham City, Call of Duty Black Ops 2, Chasing Aurora, Darksiders 2, Disney's Epic Mickey 2, EA Sports, FIFA Soccer 13, ESPN Sports Connection, Game Party Champions, Just Dance 4, Little Inferno, Madden NFL 13, Mass Effect 3, um, Nano Assault Neo, NBA 2K13, New Super Mario Bros. U, Ninja Gaiden 3, Razor's Edge, Nintendo Land, Rabid Lands, Scribblenauts Unlimited, Zing Party, Skylanders Giants, Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transform, Tank Tank Tank, Tekken Tag Tournament 2 Wii U Edition, Transformers Prime, Trine 2 Director's Cut, Your Shape Fitness Evolved 2013, Warriors Orochi 3 Hyper, Wipeout the Game 3, and Zombie U. And so out of all those games right there, probably, I mean, there was like, obviously like the Assassin's Creed, Batman, Call of Duty. Those were pretty cool to have, right? Along with like the sports titles. And then Mass Effect 3. But I do remember hearing something like that. The performance on some of those games were pretty bad, though. So, yes, it's cool that it was getting games like you would see on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox. But from what I understand, like the frame rates and all were kind of bad. So, just FYI, if you're planning on getting some of those. I did hear that Batman Arkham City Armored Edition, it does make some pretty cool use of the touchpad, though. So, I've been almost kind of curious to play it that way. But you did have like New Super Mario Bros. U, which was a brand new 2D Mario game in the lineup of New Super Mario Bros. Games. But those games there, while they're cool, I mean, they're Mario games, they're 2D Mario games and all, they're fun, but they weren't really like revolutionary, right? Like the way previous 2D Mario games have been. And so I think overall that kind of hurt, just its overall reception. But yeah, the Wii U. Interesting system. Like I said, I've been having some fun with it now just because I've been able to mod it and all, but on its own, when it came out, it was a bit, and it's not like it didn't have any great games, because honestly, I mean, a lot of the games that came out eventually on the Switch were Wii U ports, right? So I did like a list of like my top 10 favorite games from that era of Nintendo, and I actually ended up combining the Wii U and the Switch list just because a lot of the games that were on there were like really some of the more must-play games on the Nintendo Wii U that you couldn't play anywhere else outside of the Switch. And then a lot of the games that I feel like some of the best games on the Switch were those ports from the Wii U. So I was like, oh, I just might as well combine them together, right? But yeah, it was an interesting system. Yeah. But all right, let's move on though from those systems there. So the highest grossing games of 2012. Let's see. So I'll just go over here for. Let's see. Well, actually, sorry. Let me jump over to the most critically acclaimed titles. So the number one game as far as game ranking goes, it was for The Walking Dead Episode 5, No Time Left from Telltale Games. We'll get more into that game there. But yeah, wow, that was the most highest ranking game on game rankings anyways. Game of the Year awards. So, I mean, it kind of came down to The Walking Dead, Journey, and Dishonored. Probably Journey and Walking Dead were the ones that were really highly praised the most probably this year. And we'll get more into those games later. Let's see. All right, but let's go over some events that happened this year. So February 3rd to the 29th, so Sega reduces Western business after the release of Binary Domain and focuses on digital on PC and mobile. March 5th to the 9th, Game Developers Conference 2012 held in San Francisco, California. April 6th through the 8th, PAX East 2012 held in Boston Convention and Exhibition Center. April 27th, the Kirby franchise celebrated its 20th anniversary in Japan. May 2nd through the 5th, so the Korean Esports Association, Ongunment, Blizzard Entertainment, and Goam TV announced the introduction of StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty to professional competition in South Korea, with StarCraft Brooding War being completely phased out in October. June 5th through the 7th, so E3 2012 at the Los Angeles Convention Center. The Metal Gear franchise celebrated its 25th anniversary in Japan. August 2nd through the 5th, QuakeCon 2012, the massive annual LAN party is held in Dallas, Texas. August 15th through the 19th, so Gamescom 2012 held in Cologne, Germany. August 30th, the Street Fighter franchise celebrated its 25th anniversary in Japan. September 20th to the 23rd, Tokyo Game Show 2012 is held in Chiba, Japan. September 26th through the 29th, the Eurogamer Expo 2012 is held in Earl's Court, London. October 24th, Polygon is launched. November 6th, the Ratchet & Clank franchise celebrated its 10th anniversary in North America. So we're getting into the double-digit anniversaries for some games that came out in the 6th generation. And then December 7th to the 9th, the Spike Video Game Awards was held. And December 17th, the Mega Man franchise celebrated its 25th anniversary in Japan. So let's see. So notable deaths. So let's see. January 13th, Bills Phosphorus Sears, age 58, developer of Game House and co-founder of Digital Eel, passed. February 16th, Michael Kuhl, 32, developer of Insomnia Games, passed. February 19th, Steve Kordek, age 100, inventor and pinball innovator. He passed. April 8th, Jack Tramiel, 83, founder of Commodore International, passed. July 16th, Christian Oberth, 59, developer of Anteater, Artie the Artivac, and Rescue, passed. August 11th, Paul Steed, age 47, art and animation for Quake, Quake 3, and Wing Commander 3, passed. September 3rd, Michael Clark Duncan, 54, actor, who's been in tons of movies and also played roles like Balrog in Street Fighter the movie, The Legend of Chun-Li, Benjamin Keene in Saints Row, War Dog and SOCOM 2, and the one that I know most known for as far as video games goes is Atlas and God of War 2. And of course, he was also the actor in the really great movie The Green Mile. September 11th, Ian Abercrombie, 77, actor, so he passed. And then October 10th, Mike Singleton, 61, British game developer and creator of The Lords of Midnight, passed. December 3rd, Christopher Erdhart, 53, developer and Digipen's professor at Game Designs and Productions, passed. All right. And then, well, let's see. As I've been going through the years here, they change things up each year here on Wikipedia, and like I said, I've just been sticking to this instead of trying to browse the internet all over the place for information. But so as far as for like the highest grossing games, so it looks like they just have here for worldwide sales. So I'll go over that here. But let's see. All right, so it looks like it breaks it down here by revenue. So number one, it shows here Call of Duty Black Ops 2 with at 1 billion. And then Crossfire, 1 billion also. Number 3, World of Warcraft, 986 million. Excuse me. Number 4, FIFA 13 at 444 million. Number 5, Borderlands 2 with 300 million. Number 6, World of Tanks, 280 million. Number 7, Pokemon Black 2, White 2 at 267 million. Number 8, New Super Mario Bros. 2 at 238 million. Number 9, Minecraft at 237 million. Number 10, League of Legends at 200 million. Okay. All right, well, let's go over now into the actual games that came out this year. Let's see. Of course, not all of them, but I'll try to touch base on several of these here. And I started noticing as I was doing this list here is that there's a lot of multi-platform games this year that were probably the more notable ones. So that's kind of cool. But the first game I wanted to talk about here was for Kingdom of Amalur: The Reckoning. Now, the game, I remember playing it back then. I think I downloaded it for the PlayStation 3. So another thing that was happening at this time was that, so I had gotten this, the PlayStation, excuse me, Plus subscription back then. And so you would get like, what, 2 free games, which, still ongoing to this day. But 2 free, well, free in quotation marks, right? As long as you have the subscription. And so I remember I was just downloading a bunch of games as they were coming out, and I never ended up playing a bunch of them. Just like I said, right, my backlog just started increasing a lot during this time. But I remember downloading it back then. I think it was one of the games on there and played it, and I was like, oh, okay, it seems like a pretty interesting medieval fantasy RPG. And I mean, it looked pretty cool. I'd be interested in maybe checking it out again at some point. But one of the main things I want to talk about this game is just because I thought it was interesting is the backstory behind it on how this game was created. And so I just looked up some quick information on it here because I remember hearing that it almost bankrupted a state. And so as I started reading a little bit more into it, so basically what happened was, at least going off of what I'm seeing here, is so the game 38 was made by 38 Studios. So it was founded by former MLB pitcher Curt Schilling, and they went bankrupt in 2012 after defaulting on a $75 million loan from Rhode Island, so the state of Rhode Island, to develop Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning. Despite the game's moderate success, the studio couldn't cover high development costs, leaving taxpayers with roughly $28 million to $75 million in debt and triggering an investigation. So let's see. So in 2010, Rhode Island gave 38 Studios a $75 million loan guaranteed to move to Providence and create jobs. So the game sold over 1 million units, but needed closer to 3 million to break even. The company collapsed, so the company missed a payment to the state in May 2012, laid off all employees, and filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in June 2012. So the financial fallout. So Rhode Island took ownership of the Kingdom of Amalur IP to recoup costs, eventually selling it to THQ Nordic for $900,000. Lawsuits against 38 Studios executives and state officials resulted in partial settlements of roughly $61 million by 2016. Yikes. So, yeah, I just thought that was kind of an interesting story with the whole everything that happened with that game there. But what it is, I mean, yeah, it's a decent fantasy RPG. There's been like a remaster that has come out recently for like the modern game console. So I would say if you're into that kind of RPG kind of games, it's worth checking out. But we also had another sequel to a Final Fantasy game that was a direct sequel to a Final Fantasy game. So kind of like what we had with Final Fantasy X-10-2 or X2, however you want to call it. Kind of the same with Final Fantasy 13. And so it's interesting because Final Fantasy 13 was, I talked about it before, right? And so it was not the best received Final Fantasy game. And so that's why I was always surprised that it got not only one, but 2 direct sequels. And so the first one of those sequels came out this year. So Final Fantasy 13-2, or however you want to call it. Excuse me. And I haven't played this one. My understanding that it more or less plays the same as the Final Fantasy 13, just with improved combat aspects of it. But again, I'm not too familiar with the whole lot about it. But yeah, it came out this year. And I mean, it seems like people that really like the series, though, really enjoyed the overall trilogy, as I do hear for a call for a lot of people wanting these games remastered again, which would be cool, right? But I don't know. I mean, I probably wouldn't mind going through Final Fantasy 13, honestly, at some point again. It's just I don't have too much interest in playing like the sequels. So, but for a lot of people, though, seems like they really like them. Let's see. But then just touching base really quick on some games that came out for the 3DS. So we had New Super Mario Brothers 2, right, which was a 2D Mario game, which was pretty well received overall. But again, the New Super Mario Brothers, like I've said before, they're cool games and all. They just, weren't really innovating on too much, but it, still had classic Mario gameplay. We had a Tekken on the 3DS, which ran pretty well. I mean, it looked pretty good. I mean, almost like a PlayStation 2 game. So kind of impressive seeing that on the little system. And then also we had Resident Evil Revelations, which is kind of like a spin-off game on the Resident Evil series, but really looks really good. I haven't played this one really, and looks pretty incredible though. And from what I've heard from people, it's definitely one of the more better Resident Evil spin-off games out there. So maybe when I'm done with Resident Evil Requiem, I might finally get into this game here. But then we also had this game Binary Domain, which was from Sega. And I remember this is a game that I downloaded on the PlayStation 3. As again, it was one of those free games. And it's interesting. It kind of plays a little bit like Gears of War. And I remember I played like the first area, the first level. And I thought it looked impressive to me. So maybe one that I might try to give a shot again at some point. We had Ninja Gaiden 3 though. And so that one there, it's the least favorite of like the Ninja Gaiden modern games. Ninja Gaiden 1 and 2 were really great. This one, I haven't really played it, but I've just heard that it's just not as great. I think it just gets a bit repetitive. And eventually there was like a updated version of it called Razor's Edge, I believe, that, fixes some of the issues. But from what I understand, it's still kind of considered the weaker one though out of that trilogy there. We also had Asura's Wrath. I'm not too familiar with this game other than you played this dude that looks like he's pretty pissed off to the point where he's taking on a godlike being that is bigger than a planet. A little bit that I've seen of the gameplay on this and all, it looks pretty intense. I believe it's from Capcom. I always see like QTE gameplay on this, so I don't know. I think it's like it must be some kind of an action game, but not something. Again, this is where I started losing track of a lot of games, but not something I'm too familiar with. But if you like games where your character has a lot of rage, this seems like one to maybe check out. We had The Darkness 2, so this is a sequel to the game The Darkness, where you control like these sort of like black tentacle looking things that has like a voice, almost kind of like Venom sort of. Again, I'm not too familiar with the sequel here, so I don't know how good it was, but I know the first one was pretty good and unique, so I would think that this one should be at least interesting to check out. We had another sequel for Soul Calibur, so this is Soul Calibur 5. Again, I have it on my PlayStation 3 downloaded. I just never really played this one too much. And God, I'm sorry. I just, there's a lot of these games that I know about them. It's just I don't have like a lot of information on them. But it's a Soul Calibur game from what I understand. I mean, it seems good. Like it plays pretty well and all. So, another Soul Calibur game. Same thing with Dead or Alive 5. I don't have, I have this downloaded. I've played it some, but don't have a whole lot of experience with it otherwise. But then we also got an interesting crossover though, and this one I did play some, and this is for Street Fighter Cross Tekken. And so they combined these two worlds finally. I think that it had been long rumored, right, that people really wanted this crossover to happen. And so they finally did it. And so it's done in the graphical style, kind of similar to like the Street Fighter 4, only a little bit more cartoony, and the like the outlines of the characters and all a little bit more bolden. And it has like this weird kind of like gems sort of system that honestly I forgot what it's all about. But I thought it was pretty cool, right? Just because getting to fight as Ryu and Kazooie, right? And all, I thought it was pretty cool. But I do remember though, because I remember this game kind of fizzled out pretty quick, and so I remember thinking, I was like, this game, I guess it just didn't take off. And so I was always curious, like, what happened? And I know that there was some kind of a controversy to this game. And so let's see. Okay, here we go. So, and again, this is just a quick Google search on this from what Skynet's telling me here, but so I don't know how accurate this is. But Street Fighter Cross Tekken, so it was primarily infamous for its, at the time, unprecedented on-disc DLC scandal, where 12 characters were locked behind the paywall despite being fully functional on the game disc. This, combined with a decisive pay-to-win gen system and broken timeout-heavy gameplay, caused massive community backlash and crippled its commercial success.
That's right. Okay. I remember that about the DLC now. Okay, no. But let's see. So what's the gem system? Okay, so let's see. So the game featured a gem system that provided passive stat boosts like damage, speed, and defense to characters. Critics and players deemed it play to win because some gems were only available through paid DLC. With some being flatly better than others, disrupting competitive balance as highlighted in a video from, and it gives a link to a video there. Okay. Interesting. Like I have it downloaded on my PS3, and just as a very casual single player playthrough, I thought it was pretty cool. Right? Again, getting to play as like Tekken and Street Fighter characters, but apparently it had a lot of controversy though behind that. So if you do wanted to check it out, proceed with caution on all that. But let's see here. Another game that came out for multi-platforms, and so was for Borderlands 2. And so talked a bit about Borderlands in a previous episode. Again, another series I'm not too familiar with overall. I mean, I know about them. I just don't have any direct experience. But Borderlands 2, it's from what I understand, it's kind of the more fan favorite one. And this is the one that people really seem to talk about and all, and it just seems to be kind of the more highly revered one there and all. But yeah, the overall series, though, again, it's a series that I definitely have interest in playing at some point, just haven't gotten around to it. But it's still taking like that sort of cell shaded graphics with very kind of zany character designs and all, and so what's called like the looter shooter. So yeah, they seem like fun games. I definitely want to try them at some point. Then we also had Dishonored, which this game here, what I understand of it, it's like it takes place in this almost kind of like steampunk sort of era. It's like a stealth game, kind of like a steampunk Victorian setting. I don't know. That's just when I've seen like the screenshots of it and all. I was like, oh, it looks interesting. And so yeah, I mean, it kind of almost like an immersive sim. Again, I just another game that I just haven't gotten around to playing. Yeah, I know that it ended up getting a sequel eventually afterwards too, and I know that for some people, I do recall that this game was in talks about like being the game of the year. So I mean, it definitely has its fans and all, and definitely another one too that if I'm interested in playing a new stealth game, one that I should probably give a shot at some point, as I just remember it being pretty highly regarded, but I just don't know much more about it other than that. But then there was Dragon's Dogma. So this is a RPG from Capcom, which they were doing like an RPG that was kind of like a Western RPG. It's very medieval kind of RPG with like in the lines of like something like Lord of the Rings, Skyrim and things like that. So it was an interesting choice for Capcom to do this. I think they were just maybe trying to expand out their overall portfolio of games. From what I played of it a little bit, and from the reception overall that it got back then, it seems like it was a pretty well liked RPG, to something that didn't quite break through like Skyrim or something like The Witcher eventually did, but not a bad RPG though, from what I understand. And then we got Darksiders 2. So this is the kind of action RPG game or series where you're playing the one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Where in the first one you played war, and this one I believe you played death, if I recall right. And I mean, they seem like pretty cool games. I think the first one was better received than this one, but overall, I mean, they seem pretty good overall though. Sleeping Dogs, though, this is a game that I did play through and beat. And so this is I mean, it's kind of like Grand Theft Auto, only in Hong Kong. And it's cool, though, because so it's mission-based, open world, right? Kind of like Grand Theft Auto. But it has a really cool story to it. I mean, the story to it is kind of God, I'm trying to think of like there's a movie that was kind of similar to it. I forgot, but anyways, it's a cool story to it, and where you play like this undercover cop that are infiltrating the Yakuza, I believe, or not the Yakuza, the Triads, I believe, and has some actual celebrity voice talent in it. And another thing that makes this game stand out is a combat system, which is it takes it's very similar to like the Batman Arkham combat system, and so it makes it for a lot of fun to play. Yeah, I really dug this game. I thought it was pretty cool, and so like I said, I did eventually beat it and had a really fun time with it. There was a remastered version that came out afterwards too, so you can play with higher frame rates and resolution and all that. Yeah, I mean, if you haven't played Sleeping Dogs, but are you like games like Grand Theft Auto and all, definitely check this game out. It kind of, unfortunately kind of went under a lot of people's radar, I believe. Excuse me, but I do highly recommend it if you want something that's like has a cool story to it and like kind of like the detective story, but with some kick-ass combat in it. Cool soundtrack too, also from what I recall. But another game that I beat also and is definitely I want to play this game again, but it's a Spec Ops: The Line. So this game in more recent years has really been praised a lot for its story, and so I remember when I played it back then. And again, this is a time where I have a bit of a I remember playing it, I remember liking it, but I did feel it was a bit of a generic shooter and ultimately didn't stand out too much. But afterwards, I kept seeing this game as like, having one of the better stories out there in gaming and all. And I was like, yeah, I do remember it had a very controversial story to it and all, where it's just kind of like, it's an action game and all, but it sort of explores like the heart of darkness, I guess you could say, of what soldiers go through, right, at war. And there's one particular scene that I remember kind of stands out as one of the more disturbing scenes in video games. And like I said, at the time when I played it, I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of messed up. But, like I said, my mindset at the time was on other things. And so that's why I do want to go back and play this game and, really, with my more, I guess, mature brain and, to really get into the story of this more. Nolan North does the voice for the main character there. And this game was delisted, I know, on the Xbox storefront, where if you have the game, you can still download it, but it's not available on there anymore. So just FYI on that. I don't know if it's backwards compatible with the disc, though, like if you have the original disc. But great game, though. So, yeah, I mean, this and Sleeping Dogs, I feel like are kind of underrated gems during this generation here. And so those are two that I would definitely recommend. But then we had Assassin's Creed 3, and this game, so again, so as far as Assassin's Creed games go, right, I really got into 1 and 2. This game, I was still kind of had an interest in the series, and so I remember I really liked the setting of this game, taking place in the Revolutionary War. I thought that was interesting, and the setup to the game is very interesting, right? Well, I mean, if you haven't played it, right, I'll just without of spoilers, it's just interesting on how you control or who you control. I guess I'll say that. But I mean, it's more Assassin's Creed. I really like the setting to it. So this is actually an Assassin's Creed game that I do want to go back and finish. There's like remastered versions that have come out since, right? That you can play it with, a bit improved graphics and all. And so I think it's a bit of an underrated one, though, I remember it wasn't as beloved as Assassin's Creed 2, so it kind of got panned for that a bit. But I personally liked the setting and what I felt where the story was going and all. And so this is one that I would want to go back to and finish at some point. But then we got a Resident Evil game, but it is kind of considered to be the worst one, and that's Resident Evil 6. And I will say, out of like the mainline games, right, this is my least favorite one, but I don't hate it. I actually recently did my top 10 or ranking the mainline Resident Evil games. And this one I did have in my last place, but like I say on there, though, it's not, I mean, if you go into it expecting a survival horror game, you're going to be a bit disappointed, right? But if you go in there playing it as an action game with some horror elements to it, then it's not that bad, actually. It's not that bad. So, just kind of go into it knowing that. But I remember I rented the game at the time because it was Resident Evil, right? So I did want to play it, and I think I got it from GameFly, and I played through it. I played through all the campaigns and all, and I was like, I do remember thinking it is a bit of a chore to get through, but I don't hate it. Right? So that's ultimately my opinion on Resident Evil 6. If you're a fan of the series, check it out, right? It kind of ends in a way or plays in a way like it's almost like the end game of Resident Evil, right? Because you have all these characters, right, from all the, a lot of the characters from the previous games, and they're all coming together, right, in one way or another. And so it kind of felt like that. Obviously, the series continued on, but at the time, though, right, it felt like they were just throwing everything at it, and for this bombastic finale, but it was perhaps a little bit too bombastic. But not a bad game, though. I would still recommend playing Resident Evil 6. But one cool game, and I forgot it came out this year, was Max Payne 3. And I love this game. This is one game I do want to go back to and play, and I wish it would get a remaster of some sort, but because the frame rate was kind of choppy on this. But I think if you play it on PC, like I think I have this on my Steam Deck, and I want to say I think it runs at 60 frames. But Max Payne 3 is awesome. So the first two Max Payne games were pretty cool. But this one though, now it's done by Rocksteady, or not Rocksteady. Fuck, I always get these Rockstar, and they it has now like a cover mechanic, but you still have the slow motion gunplay and all, and the action gameplay is really fun. It's definitely one of the cooler action games of this generation. Same voice actor that voiced Max Payne, rest in peace. I know he passed a few years ago, but you know he still gives us very like deep kind of voice right to the character, very Nor like. And now though the game gets out of New York into a more sort of tropical setting, but it still retains that sort of like North sort of storytelling and the directing on this game now and all, because the cinemas and the story is actually really well done, and the way they directed it with a lot of like these weird like flashy sort of scenes and all, and the crazy editing, it's kind of something like a Tony Scott movie, like let's see if you've ever seen the movie, let's see, Domino or Man on Fire. Those are two movies that come to mind. I remember when I was playing this game that it reminded me of how they did this directing on this. And the story is very mature, very gritty. Max Payne, I mean, dude's been through some shit. And yeah, just a cool game. God, now that I'm talking about this game, I do want to go back and play it. Just a kick-ass game. And it's has a kick-ass soundtrack too. I believe so, I don't know if all of it or just one song is done by this group called Health, I think is what their name is. But there's this. I'll just say that there's this section towards the end of the game where this song starts playing, and I remember thinking, I was like, this is fucking badass. I love this game. It's so cool. Kick-ass action, cool music. Max Payne, God, man, you've been through some shit, but let's do this. Going out and just, an all-out shootout, right? Awesome game. I highly recommend this game if you haven't played it. One little knock about it is that sometimes it can be a little story intensive, right? Where sometimes the gameplay segments feel a little short, but it's still hella fun, and you do get a really good story too as well, right? Really well acted across the board and all. And yeah, just a great game. I highly recommend Max Payne 3. And another game that I highly recommend, and I actually just saw some pretty good news on this here, so I'm hoping this comes true, but it's for Transformers Fall of Cybertron. So 2 years ago, well, 2 episodes ago, I should say, in 2010, I believe, I talked about Transformers War for Cybertron. And so it's this really cool game made by High Moon Studios, I believe. And so it's an original story where, you're the Transformers, you're playing as the Autobots and the Decepticons, and you're going through Cybertron, right? And you done in Unreal Engine 3. Cool story, cool action, so much cool Transformers lore. Awesome game, right? Transformers War for Cybertron is an amazing game. This is its follow-up, Fall of Cybertron. Kind of takes more of the same, but just amps things up even more. Pretty much same level of quality all the way throughout, right? And just continuing on the story from that one. Again, I don't remember a whole lot of the story. I just remember that I absolutely love both of these games when I played it. One thing that stands out in this game, and just to give you a little bit of a insight on what this game is, like if you're a Transformers fan but have never played this game. So just imagine, when you were a kid, if you're kind of like an old soul like me, right? And you grew up with the Transformers and you're going through Cybertron, right? Like let's say you're going through Cybertron as one of the Autobots and you're fighting the Decepticons, and then alongside you have fucking Metroplex walking, off in the distance, right, helping you attack the Decepticons. And the scale of him and all just looks huge, and all as he's kind of, stomping around, right, and all joining you in battle. That's the kind of intensity you can get with this game. And I think it's Metroplex is fighting you. Like I said, I have very distinct or vague memories of this game. Wait, did I just say this? No, I have vague memories of this game, but I just remember that one part where I think it's Metroplex that's fighting alongside you, and I just remember like panning the camera, right, looking off in the distance. I'm like, holy shit, this is like my childhood come true. And so, anyways, awesome games. I highly recommend these games, even if you weren't a fan of the Transformers. They're just kick-ass action games. Having said that, I just saw a YouTube video fairly recently, so I don't know how true this might be, but supposedly this dude, I forgot his name, and I don't want to like give this guy a lot of credit or discredit him in any way. I don't know this particular YouTuber. It's just a video that I randomly came across, but I'm just hoping this is true. But basically, supposedly he has a friend or something that works at Xbox, and he came out recently saying that his friend told him that they had a meeting, and that supposedly that they talked about that they're getting the licenses for the Transformers games to come on, for a lot of the games from Transformers to come onto Game Pass sometime in the summer is when it's expected. And so some of the games that are expected is like that Transformers Devastation, but then also this one and War for Cybertron, along with some of the other Transformer games that were based on the movies. It's not really known if, again, how much, it's not like 100% confirmed. That's just what he was told. And then who knows if they're going to drop them all at once or if they're going to trickle them in, like one by one after a period of time. I hope it's true because these games need a re-release. They're so good and they could really benefit from a bit of a, frame per second boost. But yeah, Transformers, man. These games are so awesome. I really hope they bring them back. I got them on the PlayStation 3, which I can play there, but man, the frame rates are really choppy on those. Because when I got them, I was like, it can't be that bad. But then when I started playing it, especially on my big screen TV, and I'm like, oh god, that's really choppy. They're still playable, but like I said, they're definitely still playable. But yeah, hopefully comes true. As just the thought of playing those games again is just makes me happy. But yeah, kick-ass games though. But we also got the Call of Duty game for this year was Call of Duty Black Ops 2. And so again, we were kind of hopping between Black Ops and Modern Warfare during this time. And so this is the second Black Ops games. And the Black Ops games were being a little bit more story heavy, right, than the Modern Warfare games, where they weren't quite grand in scale, but they had a bit of story to them. And this one, I kind of remember for it having a memorable villain. I think his name was Raul something. And I remember I actually kind of liked the story to this one. And I remember there was this pretty cool scene too where you go like into this club and then there's like a Skrillex song playing, which, back then dubstep was a kind of the thing. Which reminds me, is dubstep still a thing? I don't really hear much about it, but yeah, that's one of the things that stands out on the skin that I remember. And I mean, like, this was still during the time with the Call of Duty campaigns I felt were really cool, memorable, and yeah, just, I mean, and again, of course, the multiplayer, I'm sure you're right, was really cool back then for people that were into that. But if you want like a cool single player campaign, though, Black Ops 2, Black Ops and Black Ops 2 are definitely worth playing. But then we jump into Mass Effect 3. And so the finale of this trilogy. And the game opens up in a really incredible way. I love the intro to this. I mean, it's kind of like, if you've been following along on this series, you kind of know that there's this threat that has been looming, right, in the universe, and now it's all of a sudden attacking. And so the initial invasion scene on this game is pretty incredible. I remember being like so floored when I first saw it. I was like, holy shit, it's on, right? Like everything that has accumulated from the first two games into this one, you're like, okay, this is the end game. Let's go. And so, I mean, eventually, the game is cool. And Mass Effect 3 is a cool game. The structure to the game, though, it didn't feel quite as well paced as Part 2. Because Part 1 and 3, I mean, they're great games. Don't get me wrong. They're really great games, great characterization, writing, gameplay, and all that. It's just that Part 2 had a certain structure, had a very precise sort of way of telling a story where, you're gathering your allies and then going on the suicide mission. And so everything just felt more polished, I guess. Where Part 3 and even Part 1, they kind of feel like they're a little bit more all over the place, but not in a bad way though necessarily. It's just, again, Part 2 just really nailed it. But the graphics were really well done. The gameplay was more refined in a lot of ways, and I mean, had not a whole lot of new characters, but had a few interesting new characters like James Vega, who's voiced by Freddie Prinze Jr. And I mean, overall, really cool. I really enjoyed this game. The ending was a bit of a letdown, though, and which became really popular and very controversial during this time. And the reason for that is because Mass Effect 1 and 2, and even 3, right, as it was telling the story, the consequences for your choices, good or bad, was felt really impactful, right? And it all felt like it was leading to some incredible finale. And the finale, though, was a bit of a letdown. And, honestly, I don't recall a whole lot of it. I just remember that it was just sort of like, oh, okay, that's it. That's okay. I will say this, though, that when I beat the game, I beat it before it ended up coming out with its patch, right? Where I don't know to what extent, but it expanded on the ending. So, because there's a few different endings you can get. It's just that from what I recall originally, the endings weren't anything too unique from each other. And so that's why it just kind of felt like the choices you were making throughout the whole trilogy kind of fell flat. The journey, so this ended up becoming the journey was better than the finale, right? I guess you can say, right? But like I said, right, I'd never played it after they made the patches and expanded on the ending. So I've slowly been working my way through the Mass Effect trilogy again, to ultimately, hopefully, try to get the more expanded on ending. But I mean, Mass Effect 3, though, is still a really great game, and just one of the most ambitious storytelling I've seen in a video game, in a series. And like I said, even though the finale fell a little flat, just the overall journey, though, you're taking, right, as you're making these choices, going through the space opera, right, and all, and then the cool gameplay, it just was really impressive. It did have a multiplayer component to it also. And from what I've heard, it was actually pretty fun for the people that got into it, but not something they carried on over to the Legendary series remake that they made afterwards. So, but either way, though, Mass Effect 3, yeah, I mean, great. For the most part, a great finale to a great trilogy. But for me, though, definitely one of the more memorable games of this year, though, for me was The Walking Dead Season 1. And oh man, this game. So The Walking Dead, the graphics novels, and then the show were starting to become huge. The show, especially, I remember the first several seasons of The Walking Dead were just, it seemed like that's what everyone was talking about. And I will say that the first several seasons of The Walking Dead were really excellent. 1 and 2 in particular, I really enjoyed them. I always kind of liked it when John Bernthal was there as, I believe, Shane. Yeah, it's just, I really got into the first several seasons of The Walking Dead, and then afterwards I kind of like, okay, I kind of checked out after a while. But during the stretch, though, right, and where zombie shows and games and all wasn't quite completely overdone. I mean, it was getting there, but not quite, but it was still pretty cool. This dropped, and so this is from Telltale Games, and so they had already done a few games, like I believe, like Back to the Future, and I think they did a Jurassic Park one, where basically what their games were, it was done episodically, where they would take a game that is very story-based, where you make, kind of like the Mass Effect, right, and all, where you have like multiple choices you can do, and then those have consequences, and then they carry over to the next episode. And so, like, for example, you had season 1 with 5 episodes, right? Each episode plays out to like about 2 to 2.5 hours long or so. And that's how the games were. And so that's no different here with The Walking Dead. And so the graphical style that they were doing with this was with this cel-shaded comic book look, which was very reminiscent of like the actual graphic novels of The Walking Dead. So that was kind of cool, right? And all because it kind of paid homage to what the graphic novels kind of look like. But this is an original story, though, where you play as this character named Lee. And so it's set within the Rockingverse universe, as you'll even come across characters from the show, but it's still it's its own thing, though. And so again, you play this character named Lee, and without giving too much away, you're on your way to jail, as there's this police officer driving you there. But then eventually, all hell breaks loose, and so you end up kind of unexpectedly escaping this cop car. I'll just say that. And then you come across this girl named Clementine. And so again, so the game is, so this is season 1, right? And so there was 5 episodes. When the game was first getting released, right, they would release each episode, like I think within a month or two apart from each other, or something like that. I didn't end up playing the game until all the season or all the episodes were out. So I got to play them like back to back. But eventually they were trickling them out, right? And so again, kind of like a TV show. And each episode would end with like a cliffhanger and all, right? And then as you're making your choices, that affects what leads into the next episode and so forth. And so again, it's a very story-driven game. It has some gameplay to it, but it's pretty limited. But what you do get, though, is an incredible story, really well acted, and again, the graphical style is very unique. And again, where the choices really felt like they mattered that you're making in this, and some very kind of gruesome, controversial story moments in this, but that's kind of what you want in a Walking Dead story, right? I mean, I just remember there's certain things that happened in this game as I was playing. I was like, oh my God, that's intense, right? Where I never thought I'd see that in a video game. And again, without giving too much away, it ends up becoming a story of Lee and Clementine and the bond that these two have, and all just really, really is the heart of the story. And you just go through a lot of emotions with this game here. And I mean, the story is that well told, right? That even with its limited gameplay, it still hooks you like, like nothing. And it's, I mean, that was definitely one of my favorite experiences of this year. And definitely started showing me to give these kind of walking simulators or story driven games more of a shot. As I mean, I had kind of liked these games before in the past, but I was kind of avoiding them around this time. But this definitely hooked me though, and yeah, I mean it's great. I mean, so much so that I have two daughters, and I've given them nicknames. And so one of my daughters, the nickname that I've given her is Sweet Pea from this game right here. And again, it's just because of the bond that the two main characters have on it. And yeah, I mean, the story really left an impact on me, and I'm sure for a lot of people as well too. And like I said, I mean, I think it did a really good job of showing how to make choices in games matter, right? And also the fact that they could create a story that can go in many different ways, but that the overall plot though is really well told still, I thought was pretty impressive. And yeah, I mean, The Walking Dead season 1, it's truly incredible. It had, I think, three seasons after this, and then another sub season. Season 2 was pretty good. I do remember that, but I never got into the other seasons. But from what I understand, though, the first season is definitely the best one, though. Very dramatic, very emotional, packs a big punch, right? And definitely worth your time. And this would also be another game to also, like, if you have someone that's like, let's just say you have a significant other and maybe they're not too much into video games, but they really love TV shows and all. This would be a good game to show them, right? Because it kind of plays out like a TV show, very limited gameplay. And so, this is a game that, you can show off to them. You can pretty much get it on pretty much anything now. I mean, it's available on, as far as I know, on pretty much any modern console now. So definitely journey worth taking. It's there's so much to say on this game. It's just that I definitely want to leave it vague if you've never played it, because the big impact of it is the story itself, right? So I'll just leave it at that, and definitely go check it out if you haven't. So that was a lot of multi-platform games, right? And so that's kind of what this year was. But there were some exclusives, though, worth mentioning on the systems. And so I'll go over a few of these here. And so on the Xbox 360, there was two big games from Microsoft, and one of them was Forza Horizon. And so we had the Forza Motorsports games, and so those were more realistic racing simulators. But then Forza Horizon kind of started doing its own thing, though, where it's still like the same series, so to speak, only now it has a bit of a different approach, though. And let's see, this first one, actually, I'm not too familiar with. So let's see, I'm just reading over some information here. Let's see. So it takes place during the fictitious Horizon Festival, a street racing event. Okay, yeah. So basically, it takes place like in an open world setting, right? And so I'm trying to think, because eventually the Forza Horizon games, the thing that got kind of known for them is like where you play, like what's the territory, I guess, that you're in. So let me see here. So the open world map that players can explore is based on the U.S. state of Colorado. Okay, there we go. All right, so it's kind of like being in Colorado. And so, yeah, so it's open world. You race around, you find some races to partake in. And yeah, so like I said, I haven't played this one. I played the later ones, and but this is where the series started. So I wish I could comment more on it, but it wasn't until Forza Horizon 4 that I started getting into the series. I'm really looking forward to Forza Horizon 6, which takes place in Japan. Really love Forza Horizon 5 that takes place in Mexico. But yeah, this is where the series started. So I mean, it's hard to get a hold of these games now because again of all the car licenses and all. But definitely this game, the reason I like the Forza Horizon games a lot is because one of my favorite racing game series was Project Gotham Racing. And I love that series because it was kind of a combination between being a kind of arcadey but kind of racing sim, and it combined the best of both worlds for me personally. And I love those games. But of course, that company went. I don't know if the company went under or just a series, but ultimately we haven't had any more games like that. But that's where the Forza Horizon games picked up on. And so yeah, like I said, if I want some cool, fun, modern racing game action, Forza Horizon 5 has been my go-to recently. But anyways, this back then though, right? And all this is where the series started here, and cool racing game series. So again, this one here would be hard to get a hold of, but definitely the series as a whole, right? Definitely would recommend checking them out if you are into racing games like that. But the big game though for the Xbox 360, as far as an exclusive, was Halo 4. And so continuing on the series, only this time though, it went to 343 Studios. So Bungie kind of started, let's see, I don't know the full story of this. Let's see. I'll see if I can find something here as I'm talking here. But basically, I went to this other company, 343 Studios, and so they took over the Halo license. And so this one is actually not that bad. I do like the Halo 4. There's certain stages that are a bit annoying to play through, just because I feel like they're a little bit drawn out, but it's not that bad though overall. The graphics were actually really impressive, and the enemies, I mean, I felt that the enemies, some of the newer enemies didn't quite were as memorable as, like, say, like the Covenant. But ultimately, though, still a really good game, though. And it's the really cool music, and actually the cinemas on it also I thought were pretty cool as well. So yeah, I mean, I for me personally, obviously the original Halo trilogy is the best one, right? But out of like the ones that came out afterwards, one though, and it's definitely not a bad game. So I would say if you're trying to get into Halo, definitely play the first three, and Halo Reach also, because I think Halo Reach is excellent too. And if you still want to expand past that, Halo 4 would be my next recommended one. But okay, so here we go. So Bungie left Microsoft Xbox in 2007 to become an independent studio. They desired creative independence and freedom from solely focusing on the Halo franchise, which remained with Microsoft. Okay, so yeah, so they still ended up doing Halo Reach, right, which came out in 2010, I believe I talked about it. But then eventually they went on to go do another series, which we'll talk about, I believe, here in the next few years. But yeah, but this is the first Halo game done from 343 Studios, and it's cool. I mean, I do enjoy Halo 4. It's a good game overall, and definitely I would say one of the more impressive looking Xbox 360 games as well too. But then jumping over to the Wii, I mean, I couldn't really think of anything that came out on the Wii, but it was for a game though that ended up becoming the first entry in a very beloved series, and that's Xenoblade Chronicles. And so Xenoblade Chronicles, so this was done by Monolith Software, which kind of ended up becoming, I mean, as far as I know, like an exclusive Nintendo developer. And so this was it was a JRPG, and that was in Japan only, because I think the game came out, let's see, when did it come out in Japan? Because it came out previously. Okay, yeah, so it came out in 2010 in Japan. But because a lot of people were really wanting this game, and so there was a petition. So let's read a little bit about this, because I thought this was kind of interesting. So it's called Operation Rainfall. So Operation Rainfall was a video game-oriented fan campaign founded to promote the release of games not available in North America. Initially aimed at promoting North American release of 3 games on the aging Wii home video game console only, released in Japan and Europe, it later transitioned into a community blog dedicated to niche Japanese games and further fan campaigns aimed at the localization of Japanese exclusive games. From inception, its stated intention was to show publisher Nintendo the demand for the 3 chosen games. Beginning in 2011, it was designed to push for the release of Xenoblade Chronicles, The Last Story, and Pandora's Tower, 3 games released late in the lifespan of the Wii. The campaign was acknowledged by Nintendo, and though they initially announced that they had no plans, all 3 games were eventually released in North America, the former by Nintendo itself and the latter 2 by Xseed Games. Reception of the campaign has been favorable overall, and its previous success its perceived success when compared to similar earlier campaigns was also noted. So yeah, so basically these games ended up coming out because of this campaign here, right, to bring them over, and so that was pretty cool. The last story, I just know that that was developed by Mistwalker, which was the company that Hironobu Sakaguchi had done, and Pandora's Tower was developed by Ganbarion. I'm not sure what exactly they've worked on, but yeah, I mean, Xenoblade Chronicles, though, right, was the big one. And so it's like this open world game, but it's it's from the same creators that had done Xenogears and then also Xenosaga from previous generations. And so now they take that sort of storytelling and anime mech inspired setting in an open world sort of environment. And a little bit that I've played of this game, I really love it. I think it's a game that I could really get into. I just need to find the time to get myself into a really beefy JRPG, but incredible music, incredible gameplay, and definitely a fan favorite. And so it originally came out on the Wii, so kind of late in that system's lifetime, but would only later get remastered for later consoles, and then also had a lot of sequels, right? And I mean, to this day, they're some of the more sought after Nintendo games. And this is where the first one started, well, at least here in North America, right? And it was due to this campaign here that they were able to bring it out. And yeah, I mean, it looks pretty stunning too on the Wii. Obviously, the remastered version looks better, but considering what they were able to do on the Wii with a really expansive open world and pretty decent character models and all, I was actually pretty impressed. I would say it's one of the more technically impressive games on the Nintendo Wii. But then jumping over to the PlayStation 3, we had we had Twisted Metal, and so this is sort of like a reboot a bit of the series, and it's still the same vehicular combat sort of open space game. And I haven't played too much of this one. It seemed that it was fairly well received. It was I mean, it came out kind of late into the system's lifetime, and I just don't recall like the overall reception on this game. I'm thinking maybe must have not been too big, seeing as we haven't had another Twisted Metal game. And it's unfortunate because this is a really cool series, and this is a series that I would say would actually kind of work in a live service model. I hate to say that, but it kind of would, I think. And I think they've actually tried to do that, but they just haven't been able to get it off the ground. But I mean, Twisted Metal, the name is still relevant. I mean, there's a TV show that's out there. I saw the first episode, and I thought it was actually pretty cool. So I actually wouldn't mind continuing watching that show. But Twisted Metal, yeah, a little bit that I've played of it. It seems fun. Twisted Metal games are more fun played like in multiplayer for sure. And so, I mean, I don't think that the online component of that is still active. And, I mean, I'm sure it has a single player campaign, but that kind of gets boring after a while. So, but still, I mean, it's unfortunate, right, that this series has sort of gone down because it was a really cool series. But yeah, this is where as far as I know, I think this was the last Twisted Metal game that came out all the way back in 2012. But for me, though, and my favorite game of this year, I'm pretty sure it was anyways, was it was an indie game. Well, I mean, I guess you could say it's like an indie game, but it was backed by Sony, though. But it was developed by, I think, this company called That Game Company, and it's for Journey. And so this company had previously released games like this game called Flower, where you're like this flower petal, I believe. You're just kind of floating around in the grassy area in the sky and all. And it seemed like a very kind of relaxing sort of game. I never actually played that, but it looked visually kind of stunning. But Journey, I remember hearing a lot of good things about. And so I eventually ended up caving in and buying it. And again, it's kind of like with The Walking Dead, right? My two favorite games of this year. I don't want to talk about it too much because so much of it is the experience, and also because they're not that long of games, right? So anything that I would start talking about it in more detail, I feel like it'd be kind of ruining the experience. But if you've never played Journey, right, and you can also get it now, like on Steam, for example, and it's also there's like an updated version on the PlayStation 4 and backwards compatible with the PlayStation 5. But basically, I'll just say that you are this person, I guess you can say, kind of draped in robes in this sort of desert-like area, and you are going on a journey, hence the name of the game. but it's not really know why you're going on this journey. It seems to be that you're heading towards this mountain way off in the distance. The gameplay, I mean, there's not a whole lot to it. I mean, you are moving the character, right? You have full control of your character as far as where you move it, but he doesn't have like much action other than jumping and gliding. And there's some puzzle solving to it, but it's all pretty basic and all. So the main thing about this game is really just that, the journey, right, that you're taking, but the incredible visuals, the sound effects, the music to it and all, and then ultimately what the overall journey is truly something that was just mind-blowing to me, and very much an interpretation of how video games can be art. I mean, this game is beautiful in all ways, right? Um, Again, if you're wanting to check this game out, don't go into it thinking that you're going to have like this really complex gameplay system. No, it's very much a kind of like a comfort game in a way. It's very sort of like a free flowing, smooth, peaceful kind of game, right? But then it has certain moments of intensity, but just the overall concept of the game is just beautiful. And I will say this, that there's a certain aspect about the game, right? And again, I don't want to give out too much, right, and all, but what just made it legendary for me, that I would just say that when I realized what was going on, and it didn't happen until the very end of the game, I was just like, oh wow, that was really cool. Like it gave me goosebumps about just like what happened, and it's definitely something that I will always have as a cherished video game memory. It was just it just left me just really outstanding. And unfortunately, because of that, it's a game where, I mean, it's still wonderful to play through again afterwards, but it really is that first experience. So, right, where that is definitely the one that really makes you appreciate this game. As again, it's a fairly short game. I think you can beat it within like 2.5 hours or so. But if you want to go do something just truly magical, definitely check this out. It's truly an incredible game, and you'll have a lot of fun playing through it. And again, it won't take up too much of your time. But that's what I got here for 2012. And so this has been a bit of a long generation for the seventh generation, right? I mean, we're starting to enter into the eighth. And I mean, we had the Nintendo 3DS, the PlayStation Vita, and the Nintendo Wii U. But it was really the Xbox 360, and really, I should say, more the PlayStation 3 that was carrying the torch at the end, right, for the seventh generation. And next year, though, right, we are going to start making another push into the eighth generation with two new systems, one from Xbox and one from PlayStation. And so at the time, it was still kind of exciting, right, to see what was going to happen, because Microsoft still seemed like they were still a formidable competitor, right, in the video game space. But a lot would change, though, next year as far as the direction that video games would go. And that was, well, let's just say that one of them fumbled the ball pretty badly with one of their systems, with a huge emphasis on TV. And so we'll go more into that into next year. And there was also two great games, though, that were basically originated in the seventh generation. One that is from a very beloved game where you can steal cars, which ended up becoming one of the biggest games of all time. And also another certain game that was set in a zombie apocalypse, but has so much heart and really revolutionized storytelling in video game to even a further higher level. And in many ways sort of became the Citizen Kane of video games. But we will get more into that when we start talking about 2013. But until then, have a great one, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.